The triumphant Machiste and Satana prepare their coffins for the criminal syndicate in the jungle hell of an Iguana'S Bumhole.
Hello, and welcome to the Iguana'S Bumhole. This is episode 4, which is brought to you by the fine people of Campari, a Produtto di Milano. This is the show where myself, Nick, and himself.
I'm shocked. Where's the JMB?
I didn't get the scotch. Although I've noticed that Cinzano shows up a lot more than I had remembered it. But you're right. J&B would be the obvious choice.
But anyway, my name is Clive. Hello, and this is my foolish friend Nick.
Yes, that's me. So yeah, we're still working through the 64 films directed by Umberto Lenzi. We are into a brace of giallos this time, and a couple of Italian crime films, and one very important historically, but not necessarily a good film, cannibal film, which kicks off an entire generic cycle of those those things. So yes, we're up to, what year are we up to, Clive? What is Oasis of Fear?
71, I believe.
Okay, we're up to 1971. We are talking Oasis of Fear, starring Ray Lovelock and what is her name?
Ornella Muti.
Ornella Muti, yes. Who discerning viewers of my age might remember from the Flash Gordon early 80s film where she played Ming's daughter, the princess. Princess Aura, yes, right?
Aura, yeah.
Yeah. Well worth going to YouTube and just watching that one scene that will show up if you Google her name. There's one scene from that film that's going to show up that will remind you of what a weird time the early 80s were and what was considered children's entertainment that might not fly today. Bring Me the Boar Worms springs to mind. Anyway, Clive, do you want to let us know what's going on in this one, or do you want me to do the honors?
Well, here we go. This is Oasis of Fear,
okay.
aka An Ideal Place to Kill, aka Dirty Pictures.
Okay.
And so this is kind of the way this played out to me was that those three, I mean, we'll get to the fourth one, but those three films that Lenzi did with Carol Baker, An Ideal Place to Kill, Orgasmo, the other one, Paranoia. It's like, this is kind of greatest hits of things that happened in those films, kind of warmed up leftovers, but minus Carol Baker, right? Instead of Carol Baker, you got Irene Pappas and her very obvious double bill standing in for Carol Baker. So basically, Ray Lovelock and Ornella Muti, who, viewers, before you get too excited and pleased with it, should be aware that she's the definition. You look up a jailbait in the dictionary, there's a picture of Ornella Muti in this film, because she is only 15 years old. I'll just leave it at that, is it? So we don't...
I think so. I think we'll just leave it right there. So yeah, buyer beware.
Mostly as a body double, apparently, but there's a few bits where it's clearly not. It's clearly her, right? And for which Lenzi should be deeply ashamed of himself. And thank you, Umberto, also. So anyway, there.
She later on, at some point in the 90s or early 2000s, she had her boobs insured, which is you should read her Wikipedia entry. It's there's some interesting stuff in there. But that was one of the things that jumped out.
To be fair, apart from being hot jailbait in this, she's actually kind of an interesting performer who's had a very interesting career and kind of jumped back and forth between like full-on exploitation and like art house films.
Mhm.
And I looked her up. She still looks pretty amazing
Yes, she does.
for her age. And yeah, she just strikes me as she would probably actually be a fascinating person to have a chat with. I don't know
Mhm.
if she's ever been interviewed for like a zine or anything like that, or an online zine, or but I bet she would be a great interview,
Yes,
right?
I would think so. And so Lovelock is kind of interesting as well, in as much as like, so this is quite early again for him,
Yeah,
but his first ever screen role was in a film that you and I talked about elsewhere, Django Kill.
right. Yeah, he is in there, isn't he?
And that's his first ever appearance on film, and he got that job because he was in a band that played bars with Thomas Millian.
Ah, okay, there we go.
I'd be kind of interested to know what. I don't think any footage or recordings of that exists, but I would kind of like to know more about what that band was all about. But
Do
yeah,
you know
Lovelock,
which instruments they played, or
no. But apparently it's in an interview. It's in interviews with both of them where they bring up like, oh yeah, we were in a band together that was doing like the club circuit in Rome, and Millian was already an actor. But Lovelock, basically a talent scout, went out to see Millian's band and then quickly signed on Lovelock. So Lovelock's first performance is with Millian in Django Kill, where you may remember he plays the young guy who gets taken away by Zorro's festive banditos, and then doesn't have a very nice ending. That's with all of the close up meat eating.
right,
you might remember.
Right. Yeah, so, as well, Zorro, you always, it's not Fernando Sancho, but you kind of remember it as
Yes, it has to be Fernando
it's
Sancho.
a very Fernando Sancho kind of role, right? As a prize.
Yes.
Actually, it must be because thinking about it, Ray Lovelock does do some soundtrack stuff every now and again. I think if I remember,
Yes.
is it a guitar? I think, isn't it? Doesn't he like?
And he's a vocalist as well because he sings the title track to this film.
Right, but he was
That's him over the credits.
What's that film came out around the same time? It's called Queens of Evil or something like that, and I think he did the soundtrack for that. And I think, if memory serves, there was a bit of a kind of folky kind of guitar,
yes, yeah,
kind of thing. So that's probably what he did. I kind of like to imagine Thomas Millian on the drums, but I don't know.
But somehow gurning from behind the drums, you know.
Right, yeah, with a hunchback.
Yes. Anyway, okay, so yes, so Ornella and Ray Lovelock are a young couple in love who are hanging around in Copenhagen, right, in the very opening scenes, because we do see that little shot of like the Little Mermaid.
Right.
And that's also a place where obviously back in the late 60s, early 70s, one could buy hardcore pornography, which kind of is an important feature of this film, because there was different laws in different countries in Europe. There was no EU, and so yeah, depending on where you were, you either could or couldn't get your hands on filthy magazines.
There was no EU, but plenty of EU.
Yes.
This was the era of Color Climax, right, and all that stuff, which was a treasure trove of bizarre fucking
WTF
you would not get away with nowadays.
Nope.
Anyway,
so yes, so they go to a shop that has, you know, a giant like sign that just says sex over the top, and thank Christ Malcolm McLaren isn't in there.
Right.
My first concern, but yeah, they go in, they buy a bunch of filthy magazines.
Tries to talk Ornella Muti into fronting a band called Chicken Hawk or something like that.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes. Like the connections are worrying. Actually, now that I think about it.
I do like those Wow records, though, I have to say.
Not
just I mean, they're good records, right? But, yeah.
So then anyway, yeah. So they leave Copenhagen. They tip the border guard with the porn mag, which is, it's great how many times they attempt to pay for things with pornography in this. It's a recurring feature. And then
people in my local conveni are sick of me by now.
Right. Can I just get 2, Nikuman for this used copy of
which I bought in here yesterday.
So basically, so Ornella does a lot of showing her perfect behind in tiny shorts to men attempting to kind of give them the impression that they're about to get some pay for play, and instead when she gets them alone, she's like, here's a magazine to knock one out to in lieu of
while you're thinking of me later on.
Yeah,
at least
then
giving them she didn't like try and give them like a Beano annual or something.
Right, or a Jack T chick tract on how their souls were going to hell.
Right.
So
and your souls are going to hell while watching this film.
No question. So they make a bunch of money, and then they do a bunch of really fucking annoying things, like the scene where they dress up in the fringed white hippie suits and go into like a hoity-toity restaurant and release doves and all of this. Oh man, that stuff is so cringe-inducing 60s garbage. And then they run out of porn, so they make some of their own, right? With some of the first kind of selfie, she would have done great.
Believe it or not, viewers, there was a time a long time ago when you could run out of porn, which is no longer a danger.
No. But yeah, I think Ornella would have done great on OnlyFans or any of that stuff had it existed then. But anyway, so they shoot some of their own stuff. But then they choose the wrong customer. They choose some mustachioed little balding guy who immediately takes them off to the police station. And yeah, things start to go kind of south for them, right? Some Romany types rip them off as well.
Yeah, they make friends. This segment of the film feels a little underwritten, or it was supposed to be bigger or something. But yeah, they make friends with a folk hero biker, right? Yeah, and who turns up later on.
Evel Knievel figure.
But it feels as if that was supposed to be a bigger part of the story or something, because it just peters out and goes nowhere really.
And that's Aldo. No, sorry, it's Sal Borghese.
Yes,
who shows up there? Yeah.
It's a very episodic kind of a trudge in a way.
The whole opening, but until they get to Irene Pappas's house.
What's interesting as well, because that bit is such a lazy bit of script writing as well, right? It's just, our car has just run out of petrol next to. So here's an interesting thing. Would you call that an oasis? That's a weird. They're not in a desert, as far as it's. And the English, one of the English titles is Oasis of Fear. I don't think the original Un posto ideal per uccidere. I don't think any of those words means oasis, does it? I don't think.
No, I think that just means an ideal. That's probably an ideal
might
place.
Be outpost. I don't know, but
okay.
But what's interesting to me is, at least in the English dub, they basically the car runs up on the side of the road, and there's just a house,
nice middle class or upper middle class home there,
and they go, "Oh look, an oasis," and they're not like it doesn't seem like they're trying to be like it's not like a joke or
right.
I mean, it's through me. It's like why are they calling that an oasis? I couldn't quite. And plus they go ahead and title the film in it in English. Right. So it's a very weird.
Yeah, no, I have no theories as to that. There is a scene right before that where they do it. That is the scene where they attempt to pay for gas with porn, which is why they again get in trouble and have to, they can't get the gas they want because the guy won't accept.
Well, here's the other thing that confused me a little bit. There's a few moments throughout the film where you hear someone talking about a couple in a car with foreign plates, which is them, are wanted for hit and run. But they don't, right?
Yes.
Are they being confused for another couple, or is that something else that they forgot to put in the film? Or it comes up 2 or 3 times,
right.
And that's why the person in the gas station, a few other people, are on the lookout for them.
Right, yeah, you're right, because it seems like it's a bigger crime, but it feels to me like they're not responsible for that.
No, but at no point is it brought up again like, mistaken identity, or they try and, isn't it ironic that they were looking for them for this other crime, but nothing. It just seems like a weird. It's like the Oasis thing. It's just it just confused me. But yeah, so they end up at MILF Irene Pappas's place, who seems to be
ex-girlfriend of Marlon Brando.
Okay. and she's waiting for her husband to come home from work forever, it seems. He's just not coming.
Yeah. Well, I mean, she's full on because she, first of all, she won't open the door, so they break into the place through the garage and start siphoning the gas because they're just freewheeling, living life YOLO types. And then she comes in and she just starts full bore screaming at them, like, like she's like a high tension lady from the very beginning.
Well, to be fair, they did just wander into her house.
They were stealing gas out of her car, fair enough.
Yeah. I think
but then immediately
has a legit reason to be angry with.
But immediately, like a little switch goes in her brain. We almost see it, like where she's like, "Hang on, I have an idea," and then she's like, "Come on and have some sandwiches, kids." Right after full bore screaming at them and telling them she's, I'm calling the police. She just invites them in, and then we get into what seems like Orgasmo territory
for a little bit. Yeah,
we're kind of like, "Oh, this is okay. So this is a remake of his movie from like 3 years ago." But then, things start to shift a little.
Spoiler alert, semi-spoiler alert. Let's just say that there is a corpse on the premises.
Yep.
And and let's just leave it at that. So it's kind of all about who's going to get blamed for this, and then there's an ending straight out of whatever that other film was.
Yeah. With the car driving, the race car driving one. Yeah, it's basically the same ending exactly.
And there's a reference to Charles Manson with pigs being written on that. I mean, there's a lot of just like stuck together. I mean, I shouldn't admit it, but I enjoyed Ornella Mutti quite a bit, and the rest of it. As for the rest of it, I mean, it's not a boring film, and it trundles along, but I couldn't help but feel that it was just warmed up.
Yes, leftovers. No, I would agree with you. There's not much in there that's original to this film. It definitely, you're right.
Odd to have. It's also produced by Carlo Ponti, right? Who you kind of tend to think of as like much.
A little classier,
prestigious pictures. I'm not quite sure why he got involved with. It has to. Irene Pappas does have one of the more obvious body double scenes I think I've ever seen in. I mean, she's a good-looking older.
Oh, but so you know about this? Do you know you know about this? So I mean, so this is in the. So Carol Baker was supposed to play this role.
Yes.
And at the last minute, she wasn't available. Or whatever, she was doing something else in Italy at the time, and so there was a second actress who was going to be, she was like an opera singer or something. She agreed to do it, and she pulled out within like hours, apparently, of like the first day of filming, because she backed out because she was like, I don't want to do the blowjob, I don't want to do the nudity. Well, and so
Lindsay wanted to do more of that stuff in, right? Apparently, it was going to be pretty close to the edge with.
Well, that makes sense because I mean, given the title, like the Dirty Pictures title of the film. That makes sense. And so then, and there was supposed to be a three-way, which is not in the film. So that obviously they had to write out because Irene was dead set. She was okay, I guess, with fake kissing both of them, but not even the intimation of the three of them together was too much. So as a result, it was hasty rewrites and the obvious use of body doubles and stuff. And so Lindsay was frustrated, I guess. He wasn't particularly happy with having to use her because she wasn't down with the whole.
Of course, concept. He was frustrated. He was directing Ornella Mutti.
Yes, that too. Yeah. So you're right. So it's very clear in those scenes that it's not her.
Right. I mean, to a laughable degree, really, when they get to the scene, that blowjob scene, it is. I mean, she's a good-looking old woman, but she's not that very young-looking girl.
Yes, body type, yeah.
And that scene is actually quite. I mean, I suppose that's an indication of how far maybe Lindsay wanted to take it, because that's, even though you don't see anything, it's a graphic scene for a.
I agree for a
non-porno film for 71.
Yes, agreed. I was surprised. I was like, "Oh, we're into some edgier territory than we've seen up until now." But yeah, I don't know if there's much else to say because you don't necessarily want to give away too much of the
Yeah.
the twists and turns. I do like the fact that like at one point they're like painting. They've got this horrible fucking jalopy thing that's covered in Herbie the Love Bug, stuff, and then they paint it all black. And then there's a scene where obviously somebody in continuity didn't catch it, where Ornella goes back to it and it's yellow again when she's getting something out of the back of the car, and then it's like, oh, hang on, they just showed us them painting it all black.
No, Nick, that's part of the extended allegory. You're not getting it.
I see. I will say it's got a nice what do you call it, like mean-spirited kind of like realpolitik ending where the police immediately just go with the obvious, like they're just like, yeah, well, of course you're telling the truth.
As an Irishman, would you feel comfortable wearing Ray Lovelock's Union Jack jacket? That's a horrible thing, isn't it? That's
yeah, no. All right.
I think just I would add in closing, I would say I think this would probably play better if you hadn't have seen the other films, right?
Agreed.
If
this was the first of your legacy Giallos, then yeah, I think
it's okay. It's okay. It's not a bad hour and a half at the movies, right?
No, and like we've been saying all along, it's very well shot. It's very crisp, and I mean that's part of the HD, but like it's a nice looking film, and Ornella is a nice looking co-star.
God help our souls. Right. Onwards, before we incriminate ourselves further.
To 7 blood-stained orchids.
Right. Okay. I have to look at my notes and remind me what this one.
So this has got Antonio Sabato in it.
God.
Okay, I think we're gonna be in disagreement on this. I quite enjoy this. This is obviously Lenzi finally giving up. Like, the producers are like, for the love of God, would you just make an Argento type Giallo film? Stop doing these Hitchcockian whatever.
Well, I mean, it's 71, so it's not as if the Argento template had been around for that long at this point, right? I mean,
but this is Italy. I mean, it could have been out for 4 months.
Bird with Crystal Plumage, was that 70?
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm not. I suppose if you checked, if you had a look at the timeline, my guess is this probably came in quite early in the post Crystal Plumage kind of iconography thing, right?
But this is the most, when we talked last time, when you were like, you don't see these films the earlier.
Oh no, I see what you're saying. This is definitely
is completely all of the things you would expect. And it's, I mean, whatever else you want to say, he goes for the gusto here in terms of the trash. Like, this is the one where within the first 3-4 minutes we've got topless girls being slashed up in a cornfield, and you're like, okay, well, yeah, we're definitely into sleazy Giallo
the problem with this film, which is a problem I have with a lot of Giallos, and this is actually a very good example of it, is those segments are great. They're stylish, they're brutal, they're memorable. They're better than most of the kills in most of the later slasher films.
American slashers,
which watching a whole bunch of Giallos in a short period of time, it really hits you, because I think it's sometimes people forget, right? Because people tend to think of, well, there's a few proto slashers and like Black Christmas, and then you got Halloween, and then and then Friday the 13th, and then and then in that version of history, you kind of forget the Giallo influence, right? And obviously, A Bay of Blood was more or less remade as a Friday, but it's not just A Bay of Blood. Clearly, all those filmmakers had seen at least a handful of Giallos when they played in the United States, right?
I mean, I think
John Carpenter called them Giallos in the day. They just would have those European thrillers or whatever. But it's striking. You're like, oh yeah, I mean, these clearly influenced the slasher films to a huge degree.
Oh yeah, I mean, John Carpenter was very clear, I think, about how much he liked those films and how much they were an influence on Halloween.
Right, but the problem is, I think, I mean, because they're coming from a slightly different place. So by the time they start making slasher films, they're making them within the context of their horror films, right? They're horror films.
Right.
So in between the kills, it still
Right.
has the atmosphere of a horror film, right? The problem with these films is you have these awesome set pieces.
Murder set pieces, yeah. And then you
Then
get to
it turns into
the mystery
fucking
section.
Apple, like, and really boring whodunit stuff. Like,
I don't have as
really
I don't
boring.
have as I don't have as tough a time with it because partly I'm not invested. I don't care, but I don't care in a way that makes it just like it washes over me. It's not like I don't care and I'm frustrated that I don't care about this unsolving solve the mystery because often they don't make sense. I mean, giallos often are very badly plotted that way, and by the end of it, you're like, well, hang on, if that doesn't
I don't mind the plot holes either, and I don't mind my natural aversion to whodunits even that much. It's that it's so dry, like it's so boring. It's like and nothing interesting. It's just the police inspector comes and goes, God damn it, another one's dead. And like there's no interesting clue stuff. There's no like it's just, for fuck's sake, they're just
yeah, no, I
really, I'm amazed that you can look beyond it because it's 90% of the running time is that.
Not a problem for me for whatever reason.
And I have a different opinion of him in a later film. So I think it's depending on how you cast him. But Antonio Sabato is an awful giallo hero. Like, he's such a charismatic vacuum in this film.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I don't love him in this, but I love him in lots of other things. So I know that he's better than this. But you're right, he's pretty flat in this. Although it is funny, it's like they made the Versace murders, but then they made the victim like the hero because it's basically that's what he is, right? He's like a fashion designer turned amateur sleuth, which is not something I've seen in many other films. Yeah, I mean, maybe let's just talk about some of the murders. I mean, I think the young lady who goes to the art show and then comes home and feeds her cats, who are then poisoned, which is a really sketchy and dark scene. And then she's, that's a very stylish kill. Right down to like she turns around and the canvas is like bleeding from the eyes. And then when she's killed,
probably the one best shot of the film, right?
That's great. And then, but actually, when she's then lying there dead,
yeah, that's what I mean.
The paint dropping down onto her body is that's
the best. I'm sure Lindsay was like that was the one part of the film he was probably really pleased with, right? It was like
it's very effective.
There's also worth mentioning there's a death by power drill as well. It's fairly early
gory, quite gory. It's like I mean for the time.
Yeah. But it's just worth mentioning that there is a power drill murder. It's got to be pretty early on in the power drill murder.
I would think so. One of the first, I'm sure. So Ushi Glass plays Sabato. So Sabato plays Mario. He's this fashion designer guy. Ushi Glass plays his fiance, and she's like the third victim, and but she's not actually killed.
Someone tries to kill her on a sleeper train, right? But
yeah. And then, but the police have her pretend to be dead, so that I mean, one thing I learned from watching all of these films back to back is, if you were concerned about your safety, under no circumstances put yourself under police protection in Italy or Spain, because the number of times people nearly get murdered or do get murdered while there's a cop standing outside the room, or like, holy crap, they're really bad at their jobs. I mean, it's the
Riz. The one thing about this, I was thinking, well, at least I do quite like this laid back, cool Riz Ortolani score. But apparently, even that is cannibalized from earlier scores, right? So I tried giving
that was a pretty common practice in Italy, to the point where that's why The Godfather didn't win best score, right? Because it turned out to have been the main theme was actually something that he had done for another film and just reworked. But
the one thing that was good, so Camille Keaton's in here as well somewhere.
Oh, did not even notice.
As an extra somewhere apparently. Before What Have You Done to Solange and
Nello Pazzafini shows up as a guy as an early red herring with his big old mustache, getting sweated by the cops.
But the one thing this did, I suppose I should be thankful for this event. So So when this film was released in Germany, they tried to pass it off as an Edgar Wallace adaptation.
A Django film, yes, of course.
Right.
Django meets the slasher.
Not yet, Nick. Or not. What's the opposite? No more, because that would have been earlier, right? Yeah.
Right.
No, at this point they were still just about humping the kind of the end of the Edgar Wallace kind of, yeah. So they tried to sell it as an Edgar, which is not true. But then the other thing that I've seen, I don't think it's actually on the print in the credits, but you see bandied about on places like IMDb and stuff. But apparently it's an adaptation of the Cornell Woolrich novel Rendezvous in Black, right?
Okay.
So I decided to confirm this. So I went and I started reading Rendezvous in Black. This has fuck all to do with Rendezvous in Black. That's not true in any way, shape, or form. However, I haven't finished it yet. I'm about 2/3 of the way through. Rendezvous in Black is a really good book. Like, yeah, you would really.
I'll grab it for sure then.
It's a fantastic. I mean, I've read a couple of other Cornell Woolrich things which I've liked, but this may be the best of his I've read, and it's so much more, really deeply sad and emotional than you might expect.
Wow.
Yeah, no, it's a very impressive piece of work. Kind of surprised me, and this film has nothing to do with it at all.
I was gonna say, this is whatever else this film is. It's not deeply sad and emotional.
Well, I felt deeply sad watching it because I was bored shitless. But
I will say too. Sorry, Marissa Mell shows up right at that 2/3 mark of the film for the last act. She's been out. She's one of the. So it turns out that there's a bunch of these ladies who are all working for this hotel at the same time. They're all being knocked off one by one by our psycho killer. She has just gotten back from a trip to Australia, and I love this. So again, police, like she's great, and the police are great. So they know she's being hunted. So they're like, you can't go anywhere. You have to stay home. We have to put you under police protection. Somebody needs to pick up your kid from school. Well, just send your twin sister. I don't see your identical twin sister. I don't see any issues accruing from this choice.
Right.
What the fuck? And then she's the one who ends up on the receiving end of the drill. Like wow. Yeah, and maybe we don't want to give away the ending. Although I will say, if you've seen Don't Torture a Duckling, there's a thread that runs through gialli. That's an interesting thread if you've seen that. And there's a couple of other films where the killer turns out to be somebody that maybe you might not expect in an Italian setting. It makes me wonder about what was going on in Italy in the 70s in regards to all of that. But I won't say any more, because if I say any more, we'll give away who the killer is.
This wasn't the Donald Duck one, was it?
Nope, because Donald Duck shows up. That's a different Fulci reference we'll get to in, I think, Knife of Ice.
Is that Knife of Ice? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh well, yeah. At least it wasn't that. We'll get to that. That was the
yes.
nadir.
Yes, I know. You sent me a message saying that you were struggling with that one.
Jesus. Yes. So should we move onwards?
Yeah, I'm just going to say I know that you didn't love this, but I like this quite a bit. And the other thing that this is interesting is that this was lots of fun for me, and that might be because actually the police segments of this film are quite similar in feeling to where Lenzi is going to go very soon, right? This does feel like a weird hybrid Polizio giallo, which there are other ones like that. So Massimo Dallamano, or whatever his name is, he did a bunch of these as well that are kind of half cop, half slasher film, right? And this to me feels a bit like that. And Sabato gives that vibe as well. And I have a lot more time for this stuff than you do, so I enjoyed that aspect as well.
Really? Wow. Okay. Yeah.
Nope.
Accounting for taste, I suppose.
We can agree to disagree.
Yes. No. Yeah. I mean, we all know you're wrong, so it doesn't really matter. So onwards, 1972.
Yes.
The Man from Deep River, Deep River Savages, or Sacrifice.
I like Deep River Savages. That's a great title, because that really gets at some of the issues that I have with this film. When our lead hero refers to some of the characters, including his own son, as like a savage, and you're like, holy shit, dude, leave your British colonialism at home.
Yes, what is this? Oh, that's right. When he finds out that he's gonna have my little black savage.
yeah, nice Rasimov. So yes, so Ivan Rasimov is the star of this. Ivan Rasimov is one of the most fucking feral, lupine-looking dudes. Like, whenever he shows up, I'm always amazed that he's not the killer, because if he's in a giallo, 99% chance is he's the murderer, or he's involved in some kind of horribly sadomasochistic relationship with somebody, you know.
Looks like he was born to play like a member of the SS, doesn't he? He's got that kind of look about him, which I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm sure he does. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So he plays I guess he's
Englishman.
Yeah, but he's also I'm not sure if he's actually a photojournalist or if it's just his.
I think he's just a tourist, right? I assumed he was just a tourist, maybe. Although he does have the setup for underwater photography, which is kind of.
You know, so he's in Bangkok, with his girlfriend, I assume, who gets pissed off with him pretty early on because he's watching some kickboxing.
Yeah, ignoring her.
Yeah,
trying to bet on it with his money.
And then, so here's the thing. Here's again, speaking of things that are not somewhat unclear. Does she cheat on him with the local Thai guy who was giving her the eyeball in the kickboxing ring? And is that why he kind of accidentally stabs him in the bar later? Or because she does kind of seem to go off with.
It does seem like that, yeah. Yeah. But it's hard to tell. So he finally realizes that she's gone. Then he goes off to drown his sorrows in a bunch of J&B. There's some good J&B product placement in this film.
There's J&B in the jungle. He takes them on his boat, right?
On the boat, yeah. It's always front and center. Like, that's hilarious. Nothing better to get your, the taste of like water moccasin out of your mouth than a good mouthful of J&B.
Yeah, so he accidentally or not stabs a guy to death.
This seems very much like an English colonial kind of thing to do. You're in somebody else's country, you're in a bar, and you just haul off and stab a man, and then you flee to to rural Thailand, and you think like he's going to be stressed out, but no, he's on the train, like taking pictures out the window, completely unperturbed.
Got away with that one. Yeah, he doesn't seem to have much moral companionship about it. So basically ends up hiring a guy in a canoe, and he goes up river. So is in the jungles between Thailand and Burma, or Myanmar, you would call it now, right?
Oh, you know what we should just pause for a moment and acknowledge the fine work that this movie does at the very beginning by giving you a thing on the screen that tells you, like, you may find some of this distasteful, but these are in fact rites performed by these questionable folks in this place in the world. Why are you doing that?
Why are you doing that in the voice that the Electric Six sing "Danger, High Voltage" in?
Because I'm a big fan of Dick Valentine.
That sounded,
but
you have danger.
But it does that complete, and which it's that this is where we have the nod to the legacy of the Mondo film, right? Like basically trying to pass this shit off as it's not just egregiously racist, but like no, we did research. This is what goes down. But anyway, yes. So he's on the boat.
So it's quite interesting point. We'll point this out then. So before we continue, we should mention so this is the granddaddy of the Italian cannibal mention. But what's kind of interesting to me is, and I went back and rewatched this film to make sure that it was as close as a copy as I remembered it being. But yes, so now we tend to think of it in retrospect as the granddaddy of jungle Holocaust, cannibal Holocaust, eaten alive, and all that stuff. But at the time when it was new, audiences would have thought, oh, this is a Man Called Horse ripoff. Yeah. And
it totally is.
Yeah, it does follow the Man Called Horse narrative pretty closely, right? They've just swapped out Native Americans for for
tribespeople of Thai jungles.
Yeah. So yeah, the whole thing. So basically, he ends up being captured by this primitive tribe, right? And
well, primitive in your eyes, Clive, but let's be careful throwing these pejorative terms around.
Primitive tribe. And
all right, okay.
Any way you cut it. And
all right.
However, that's right, because there's a naked Mimi Lai running around, the half Burmese, half British Mimi Lai.
So you know about this, right? I mean, I guess it's, I don't know if I read it in her Wikipedia entry or elsewhere, but that she makes this brace of films, right? And then she ends up becoming a police officer in England.
Yes.
And may or may not have been involved in like arresting people for owning the films she was in during the video nasties era.
Yes, I can imagine an awkward moment or two when she's in the, is that you, Mimi?
Yeah.
When the Rozzers are checking the tapes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Weird. Cool. I didn't know that. I only knew her from this kind of,
There's something very likable about Mimi, apart from the constant nudity. There's something quite likable about Mimi Lai, isn't there? She seems like, I don't know, I've seen interviews with her of that. She seems like a properly down-to-earth, like, nice person.
Yeah, she seems very cool.
Been in a bunch of these cannibal...
She's
in a few of them, right? She's in a few of them.
Oh, yes. Yep.
So yeah, so a la A Man Called Horse, she's like the main chieftain.
It's funny. Now think about it, though. You would assume, because they have a relationship already, that Lindsay would have cast Richard Harris as Richard Harrison. Because then the posters would have been that much more easy to sell, right?
Yeah, maybe Richard was busy, I guess.
Yeah.
So after being captured by this tribe and first being used
mistaken for a fish man, right? Because he wears his wetsuit, and so they think he has magical fish powers for a while. They tie him up in a bag, they hoist him up, and then there's a great scene where they've caught two other, because it pays dividends later on. It's kind of Chekhov's tongue cutting. There's a scene at the beginning where they've captured two of these dudes from a neighboring cannibal tribe, and they cut their tongues off, and Ivan Rasimov's English gentleman character is like, they're human beings, damn it. And he's really upset. And then, that pays. And then he
finds the Statue of Liberty.
Exactly.
That's something different.
Yeah.
So he's kind of, and he was a slave, and then slowly, basically, because Mimi Lai takes a fancy to him. She's never seen an SS officer before. And
he's so
as we know from Susan Sontag, there's the allure of fascism, right? He's pretty sexy. So so basically it's him kind of slowly rising the ranks and becoming one of them.
He tries to escape a few times. There's a great scene I quite like that's just so ridiculous, where he's tied up and she comes in and she's kind of like interacting with him, and he starts to cry, and she takes his tear and she tastes it as though like, what is this? What is a tear? As though
they don't have tears in the jungle.
Apparently this tribe hasn't invented tears yet.
Also, she has access to very modern makeup, it seems, somewhere.
She does.
I mean, she's quite made up.
Her bikini line is fairly well tended to for a woman living in the deepest jungles. And then
where's that helicopter from?
I don't know, but it's interesting because there's a scene earlier that I thought would pay dividends, and I guess maybe it kind of does. But you remember when he first leaves, and he tells a guy like, don't tell anyone you've seen me, and you're like, oh fuck, he's really screwed himself now. Now when he gets lost in the jungle, people are gonna go and ask that guy, and he's gonna be like, oh, I don't know, I've never seen this guy. But they never come back to it.
No.
And then I did also like Sulalewan Suzantat, who plays Karen, which is a great name for I assume it's probably his legit name, but anyway, just made me laugh every time his name came up as Karen. And he plays the kind of our toughest warrior guy, who of course
the witch,
Ivan Rasimov, being an Englishman, naturally is able to defeat in
Is he the
single
witch
combat.
doctor who puts the curse on Mimi Lai, or is that different?
No, I think he's the scar-faced guy who at the beginning is kind of their lead warrior guy, and then he gets in the fight, and then Rasimov kills him when trying to escape, and
Right.
that's the point at which the tribe is like, "Ooh, you killed our tough warrior guy." Rather than just have you murdered now, we need to initiate you into the tribe because you're obviously, you're a strong English man.
Yes, it turns out that Tom Cruise is a better samurai than the samurai, right?
Exactly. Yes, we're very much in that territory.
Although, to be honest, rewatching Man Called Horse, it's in some ways slightly less problematic in there because in A Man Called Horse, yeah, he does do that kind of leading the Native American tribe to victory in war against another tribe stuff. I mean, this at least doesn't do that. Like, again, spoilers by the time the film ends, he's just decides he's happy to stay. Like, he hasn't actually become a better tribesman than any other tribesman or something like that. They don't push that angle too much.
Not too hard. No.
So in that way, it's a less problematic in terms of. I mean, there's other things that we get, but in terms of the white savior narrative, it's actually not quite as bad as
Yes, but that there was a lot of that about at the time because you got Little Big Man, and then this is all, and then years later we come back to it again with Dances with Wolves, and so yeah, it's a long-standing thing.
So and then to make the there's a direct lift. So the other thing they take from, because the famous thing about Mancolos everyone remembers is he has to do the
sun ceremony.
The sun ceremony, right, where they're hanging up with hooks. The version they have in this though is a little different. He kind of spins around inside a hut while people blow darts at him.
Yeah, I mean, it does look. I mean, he's got it. I have to say, Rasimov at this point has got quite a nice body on him, right? So he's up like this. It's very Saint Sebastian with the arrows in it.
It's true.
It's
and
good
I do
image.
like the whatever they put his head in, that kind of wooden box thing. That's a cool image, which they had on the poster as well, right? Or in some So there's so basically him and Mimi Lai get it on because he's risen the ranks, or and then she gets pregnant as well, and then it gets quite grim because of the curse put on her and all that stuff. And then of course there's cannibal action eventually during an escape time. We get some but what was quite interesting to me watching this now is how little actual cannibal gut munching is in.
Yes, well, that's brought up in. So there's quite a good essay in this book, the Deep Red Horror Handbook by Steve Bissett, and he talks about how it amounts to like a minute or two of screen time. The scene of like mostly this poor girl getting her parts cut off and eaten. But he's like, this is a really generative few minutes of of screen time because it explodes into this, right? I mean, but you're right, it really is, it's quite minimal. But then some of the other stuff, I mean, all the animal stuff, I
rather than being the beginning of that, I feel that's more of a holdover.
No, that's Mondo. But this is what I mean, this weird, this is appended to a fictional
interesting cross section, right? Rather than just being people tend to think of it as the original cannibal film. It's more like in this weird. It is that, but it's also a Man Called Horse ripoff, and has
there's more.
Yeah,
there's more going on for sure.
Yeah, so
but I would say
you can watch this film as well. You can watch this film in two versions, right? You can watch the full 93-minute version, and you can watch a version minus the animal cruelty if that's your thing. So you won't get to see the cockfight. You don't get to see the snake versus the muskrat. You don't see a crocodile getting his head cut off. You don't see a goat's throat slit. And of course, most famous of all, the cute little monkey having the top of his head sliced off, and then they eat his brain.
I didn't know there was a version where I could avoid all that, because I might have been fine with that. Because I saw this years ago when I had a better stomach for that kind of stuff, but I was just bummed. Particularly the goat. The goat was the one that really this time was like, oh Jesus, like.
What's interesting as well, considering the monkey brains, and a few episodes ago we were talking Sandokan lean carts, and we're thinking, wow, George Lucas really dug Lindsay films, right?
I think so. I think so, because yeah, it's definitely, yeah, it's Temple of Doom all over the place.
So there's all that stuff in there. But unfortunately, this was not directed by Ruggero Deodato. So so yeah, they talk about this feud, right? The Lenzi Deodato cannibal feud.
Right.
The thing is, Lenzi didn't really come back until he did Eaten Alive and Cannibal Ferox. And we'll get to, particularly for me, Eaten Alive is a great deal of fun, and it's a weird mix of cannibal and Guyana story.
Right. Yes.
But
two great exploitation tastes that taste great together.
Yeah, but that's enjoyable in a very short. But man, you just can't. Cannibal, the AKA Jungle Holocaust, was just so much better than this. A very similar, and then
but it's a sequel. That's the other thing, right? Like so it was Lenzi was supposed to direct, the part 2 or whatever of this, and then he decided not to, and it was given to Deodato.
Right.
And that's why Mimile is back again, and isn't Ivan Rasimov even possibly back?
Rasimov is in it as well, yeah.
Yeah. So not necessarily part 2, but basically let's do another one of those. Let's get Lenzi back, and then Lenzi was like, no.
So much better. Like not even just a little. Like Man of Deep Rivers, it's all right. Because it is kind of the first of its kind, it's notable, but it's and obviously, to have gone off and captured all this, with beautiful cinema, it's no small feat of filming, but it's not a particularly good film.
No, I agree.
It's Cannibal is just it's so much better. It's like a really extraordinary film. And then he goes and makes Cannibal Holocaust, which is just another level again, then, right? Of just fucked up cinematic alchemy, which is still, that film still works to this day. Like, that film has not mellowed. In fact, it's probably got worse.
Yeah, I would say so.
But not in just a trashy kind of. I think that film, we've talked about it briefly before, it really has shit to say, right? Whether by accident or by design, or probably a weird mixture of both. But yeah, it's so head and shoulders above. It's fascinating to see like what this filmmaker does with this, and then someone else just takes it to a whole new level.
I think you can see directors come into their own, right? So I think you can see Fulci is very much a kind of jobbing, in the same way that Lenzi is, like a jobbing director who takes the work, and then suddenly at a certain point around about the time of Zombie Flesh Eaters, suddenly you're like, oh, hang on, this is what Lucio Fulci was born to do, right? And then he does a brace of films back to back, and I feel like with Deodato it's the same thing. Like he gets to there in his, and you're like, okay, this is
right.
This is the thing that he's going to do better than anyone else.
Yeah, he does at home in it, because he also makes Cut and Run, right, which is another one of his better films. Yeah, no, I see what you mean. And I suppose you would argue once we get there.
I will strongly argue.
Lenzi and Eurocrime, but we'll debate that when we'll get it.
Very soon.
We'll dip our toes in.
Yep.
But so Man from Deep. What do you? It's interesting to know about and all that. But what do you make of Man?
It felt to me, it's funny you talk about being bored with some of the films we watched for this episode already, and for me this was the one where I was most often looking at the timer and being like, how much of this is left? I found this a bit glacially paced in parts. It was a bit of like a it wasn't neither fish nor fowl. It wasn't quite outrageous enough or trashy enough. It had a bit too much of the original source DNA you know, lots of him just hanging out and being like fishing and being like in the jungle, and I was just like, okay, all right. And then there's the whole kind of melodrama around the end with Mimi Lay and her pregnancy and all that stuff, and I was like, I wasn't really feeling any of it. It wasn't working for me emotionally that well. So I was just kind of like, I was more bored in this than in any of the others that we watched for this episode.
Oh, really? Wow. Okay. No, I would have had I mean,
but I didn't dislike it because I think
kind of thing, even at its most boring, like you were saying about it just feeling comfortable or something. Like,
okay,
there's a base level of, oh well, you know, we're in the jungle and
yes,
and Mimi Lay's got her clothes off again.
And I'll give this to this Lindsay Jungle Adventure. This is the first one we've seen so far that has had all ethnically appropriate actors playing the parts. I didn't catch any dudes in makeup in this.
Yes, it seems to be. I mean, yeah, it's mostly Thai actors, I think.
Thai actors, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I was wondering. It's a strange choice of location as well. Actually,
for this
jungle films, it's usually like Amazon or South America or somewhere a little bit kind of far out there and remote, right? I'm not sure if,
but you know, so you and I went to see Rambo in the cinema.
Oh yeah.
And I remember when we saw that, both of us were kind of like, oh, holy shit, what the fuck is this? Because it felt like someone had taken that DNA, the Cannibal Holocaust DNA, the stuff, and then wedged it into
I think that was probably Sage.
I would imagine that was Sage influence,
right.
Yeah. But I mean, that's Burma, right?
Yeah, but it didn't really have much in the way of.
No, it wasn't cannibal. It wasn't cannibal, right. I suppose.
Yeah,
but it was certainly jungle adventure to the max, and you know, in its goriest. But anyway, but yeah, I didn't hate this. I didn't find it as engaging as some of the other stuff that you found less engaging. So, potato. Speaking
of which, yeah. Fluff your pillows. Get ready for the warfest. That is Knife of Ice, aka again, waste of a great title. Waste of a great title. Knife of Ice, great title. Is even more of a waste of a good title later on. But Knife of Ice, 1972, Italian Spanish. Carol Baker's back.
Yep. Probably shouldn't have come back.
No,
in terms of like her.
Yeah. This is kind of, I suppose this is in the vein of something like the Spiral Staircase, right?
Yes. Yeah, I think very much that's what. Yeah, Lindsay has been quite honest about.
Yeah,
that being influence.
He plays a traumatized, mute woman whose parents died in a train accident.
Yep. They threw her clear. There's some really hilariously expository dialogue at the beginning where people just stop completely to explain this to other people who already know it for our benefit.
Right. And she's visiting her father and adopted father and sister, I guess, right?
You said I just thought it was her Uncle Ralph and her actual sister.
Oh, really?
Which did you watch it in English or in
English?
In Italian? Yeah, me too. So I think it was just Uncle Ralph and her sister.
I think half of the problem is I didn't give a shit.
You didn't. You didn't pay attention. Yeah. Right.
Okay. Family, and some people start dying.
Yes. It's a giallo.
Alan Scott, who played Agent OSS 117 in a French TV movie the year before this, and other than that, I've never seen this man before. I don't think he plays.
Okay.
Doctor, right?
Dr. Laurent. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So
I've run out of things.
So sure. So let me fill the vacuum just a little bit here. Okay. So to begin with, one thing that struck me right away was that this looks more like an early to mid 80s Fulci film than anything else that Lindsay's done up to now, because this film is awash with mist and fog.
Very
There's some-
shiny. It's very shiny.
Yeah, some of the scenes you're like, what's happening? Like, there's so much, which is, it's effective, it's evocative. There's a dude in this film who I really quite like. He shows up early on staring.
Crazy eyes. Yeah.
Yeah, what the fuck is with his eyes? Like, are those contacts, or does he have eyes?
Those are quite good. That's the best bit of the film, is the image of his eyes. And forgive me, because I checked out midway through.
Yep.
Did we ever find out who he is? Or what
Yes.
the story?
Yeah.
Oh.
So he's great. He's an English guy who's living in wherever this is. I can't remember what country this is supposed to be set in, but somewhere else in Europe. But he's English. He's an English Satanist, morphine or heroin addict who hangs around in graveyards.
Oh, was he the Satanist character?
Yes.
Oh, that's weird, because when he's in the police interrogation scenes,
I know,
you don't see his eyes, right?
He suddenly becomes Jermaine Clement from what's that band, Flight of the Conchords. It's quite disconcerting.
I was thinking, because we've been reading it recently, he turns into Lanark, a Thor, right?
Yeah. Yes. He's very kind of dismissive of the whole thing. He's like, But once he's like off the junk or whatever, he's kind of hilariously like whatever. But so I found him a very enjoyable red herring, because he's full on crazy in the earlier parts, and then he becomes very laconically, I don't give a shit. And then Eduardo Fajardo is fucking knocking it out of the park. He is almost at Paul Smith in Pieces level, like constantly like, I didn't mean to startle you,
right?
Sorry I left you alone for the killer to attack you. I was getting some cigarettes,
right?
Like, just
there's also very strange. There's a strange bit where he gets out the car, which is a left-hand side car, goes out the car, and when he comes back in the car, for some reason he gets in on the right side. I couldn't figure out why he did that.
He's mad,
just to be weird.
Yeah, he's just, everything he does in this I loved. I was almost frightened at the end, where it seemed like the movie was telling you he was the killer. It's like, you can't do that. You can't have somebody set up as such an obvious red herring and then be like, no, actually it was the guy who it really seemed like it was.
Fear not, Nick, because they went with a really, really laughably stupid, ridiculous
ending.
Which, to be fair, I didn't see coming.
Okay.
Maybe because I was asleep. But
right.
But it wasn't an obvious, but it was just stupid.
And they did it, okay. Again, they did a few things that, okay, fine, it's Italy, so, sometimes you see things you're not expecting to see, but there's certain things you're not supposed to do. Like Hitchcock famously said, you don't kill children and you don't kill animals, right? Because it just, it's a Lenzi, so fuck. I mean, obviously the don't kill animals part is out the window. But yes, we do in fact have that whatever, a 11-year-old girl slashed and murdered, and we also have the cat. The little kitten gets murdered as well, right?
I'm getting alarmed by the amount of dead cats in Lenzi films, actually. I'm wondering if you had an anti-cat.
Could have been. He was a dog person.
Myself, it's a little bit worrying.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
I love when
I wouldn't get him, he's dead now, but I wouldn't have asked him to cat sit for me, let's put it that way.
No. There's actually, when the cat first shows up, there's a very bizarre bit of dialogue where the little girl comes up, she's like, look what the pharmacist gave me. And I'm like, that's a weird prescription. Like, who prescribes a live cat to anybody? Yeah, no, as I said, I don't know. This one was gently, it was, it wasn't, I didn't find it as boring as you did. I found this was very much in that giallo kind of like, this is a comfortable place to be. This misty shrouded place with a lot of Eduardo Fajardo being ridiculously over the top. And then Donald Duck showed up. So we had that.
Right. So this is Donald Duck. Yes.
Yes. We have the what is, there's two frigging movies by Fulci, right? Where there's
Duckling and New York Ripper, right?
New York Ripper, yes. Yeah. So was this a giallo trope? Like a mini trope of the giallo?
Well, it's funny that in terms of New York Ripper as well, it's memorable because I love New York Ripper, but that part of it is almost the part that ruins the film, isn't it?
Yes.
Because it's
just
so
like total ridiculousness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just about gets away with it because you've been marinated.
The force of scum.
Yeah.
The force of scum. Like the scene with the dude with the toes.
Yes.
In that film is the most insane part of
silver toes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. No. What a shame we're not doing. Anyway, right. Can we move on, please, Nick? Have you finished making up things that aren't good about Knife of Ice?
No, everything I've mentioned that I liked, I legitimately liked. But yeah, no, we're good. We can.
I agree with you.
On.
I did like Eduardo Fargo. He was fun.
Right.
Right. So now we're on to. Oh no! I have a feeling that there's gonna be even bigger gap.
Again. But will I say that I did. There's actually a quote in that Spaghetti Nightmares book where so Fulci, not Fulci. Lenzi will agree with you. Lenzi is not a big fan of Knife of Ice, and even less so of actually the one with Lovelock. He said of that he wanted to find every print and burn it.
That's right. Yes.
Although that may be for now that we know about more about it, maybe for criminal reasons. But yeah, apparently he was, and in this case, he said he was given so little money that he was like, oh, when I did my first 3 Carol Baker movies, she had 38 costume changes per movie, and in this movie, she's basically in the same like jumper the entire film, and he was devastated by how little money he had to dress her up with.
We should mention as well, just in case some people don't, a trigger warning again, even though it's not the levels of Man from Deep River. This film does open with a bullfight, and
oh yeah,
that's something I noticed about the bullfight. It's quite interesting. So when the bull's there on the floor, like breathing his last, the matador takes his knife and wipes the blood off on like his mane or whatever you would call it, exactly like a porn star would wipe off his cock in his co-star's mouth or on her hair or something. It was exactly the same kind of I am done with you kind of. And somehow just that small, more than murdering the poor bull, just that little touch, I was like, dude, that's cold.
Thanks, Clive. Thanks for that. I'm sure all of our viewers are thanking you as well.
You know what I mean?
So Gang War Milan, then, Clive.
Right.
This is Lenzi's first. I mean, I would say he dipped his toe a little bit in that blood-stained Orchids thing, but now this is his first. Oh no,
this is his first proper Euro. I mean, I suppose you could argue murder is a crime, Nick. So all of the films.
Well, I suppose yes. But this is but the Polizio Tesci, or whatever you want to call it, right? Film. Yes. This is and so this is a genre we haven't talked about this before, but very briefly, this kind of really becomes a thing with Bandits of Milan, which I think is a Carlo Lazzani film that did really big business. And Carlo Lazzani is one of those directors who's kind of not a trash director, but not quite a Fellini, somewhere in that midsection, and usually had quite a political axe to grind, right? A kind of a lefty guy. And his films were interesting. And I believe it's probably Milian's first crime role, right? Like, so it's around the same time as he's doing his spaghetti westerns, but he does this. I think Gian Maria Volante is maybe in there as well. It's a good cast. It's a great film. And then it kind of kickstarts this boom, which continues then for some years, right, of the cop film. Or in this case, not exactly a cop film, because this film's hero, in heavy quotation marks, is a fruit and veg importer from Sicily who runs a profitable sideline in Pimpin. And as this film shows us, Pimpin ain't easy.
It's certainly not.
So yes. So Antonio Sabato, so you were going to say, I'll let you say it before I say it. You were going to say you were very unimpressed with his one-note performance.
Yeah, he's better here. He's better suited.
Well, there's 2 notes to this performance, which I really like. There's the hey baby, hey performance, and then there's the what are the fuck performance.
Yeah, pretty much.
And he just dials between the 2 of those the entire film.
Now, I have to say, his performance is better, but the character is such a dick. Like,
oh, I know.
yeah,
Holy
I mean,
crap.
yeah.
Wow, is this really our hero? Like, and I thought through most of the film, I was trying to figure like, no, it can't, like it must just be like there isn't a protagonist, there isn't a hero. But then near the end, we start getting these scenes of him like telling his childhood story to like one of his, to Marissa Mel or whatever. You're like, no, it really feels like they're trying to sell me that I should give a shit about this guy.
And the problem with that is, like, I don't mind having a problematic protagonist, but if you're going to go that route, I'd like to have someone like deliciously evil and over the top and nasty. But this guy is just like, he's just a skeevy kind of dick, isn't he?
Yeah.
Rather than very
Yeah.
seedy. There's nothing charismatically nasty about him. He's just
yes. So then I don't understand what problem you're going to have when we get to Almost Human very soon, which I think would meet those things perfectly.
Oh no, we'll get to that when we get to that.
It's
but
absolute scumbag worm of a lead protag.
It's a good example of, overall, what's wrong with this, I think, for me is like it does have edge. Like there's a few quite nasty deaths. I particularly like the blowing into the IV.
Oh shit! Yeah, I had forgotten about that scene, and I had forgotten about the egregious ball torturing as well, which has an amazing camera angle where the camera moves down under the chair between his legs, and we see Philippe Leroy's face like checking out the ball torturing.
Yeah, Philippe Leroy plays the French gangster muscling in on his territory in Milan, and there's a whole thing about getting into. I think I can boil this down in like 3 lines here. Basically, we've got Antonio Sabato. He plays Toto. He's, as I said, an importer-exporter of fruit and vegetables from Sicily, but he also has a when he's not singing songs about the rains down in Africa.
No, not as much as you would hope.
Right.
And then you've got Philippe Leroy, who comes in, and he is a heroin dealer dude from France. He's come to Milan, and he is going to try to make Toto use his hookers to push his dope. Toto is like, I'm not really interested. I'm not down with this. They get into a game of tit for tat. It escalates into a gang war. Yeah. Tit for tat, tit for tat, tit for tat.
The hookers get beaten up, collateral damage.
So we see things here that are very much a part of where Lenzi will go in the next 8 or 9 films we're going to watch, right? We see for the first time, or maybe not the first time, actually, sorry. We see the first time in, so this is another reason why that Bloodstained Orchids really seems to me like the first of his Polizios as much as it is the first or a later giallo for him. Because we also see our hookers in the street with little fires burning. That's gonna be in almost every one of these films we see. We're gonna see these scenes. Was this really going on in Italy in the 70s? Where like you could drive down streets and there'd be like little campfires and just hookers hanging out shooting the shit, and you'd be like, hey, come into my Fiat or whatever. And maybe Italian viewers who were around in the 70s, let me know.
Come into my Fiat. I've never heard the euphemism Fiat before.
No, okay. Anyway, we've got that's it. That's the story. There's not much more with that. There's a lot of tit for tat. There's a lot of escalation of violence, and mostly Toto's hookers are on the receiving end. When he's not beating them up, they're getting beaten up by Leroy's men.
But again, unfortunately, I mean, I don't know if you have a different take on this than I do, but still quite Blair. Like in the, it's like it's not cranked up for some reason. The elements are there, but for some reason he just refuses to crank it, right? Like, so it just kind of trundles along. Sabato shouts at people, and then there's a split second of something that and then it goes back to Sabato being a dick and shouting at people, and it's just never kicks into gear. I don't think this film. It's a real wasted opportunity.
Funny, I liked it more this time than I did. I think I watched this back then when I watched a bunch of them all around the same time, and it kind of, to me, maybe it paled in comparison to when we get to things like violent Naples, right? Napoli Violenta. we get to what I would almost consider to be like attention deficit disorder filmmaking, which I don't know how much time you're going to have for that. I really like it because if you're bored of this scene, don't worry, because 2 minutes later, something completely different is going to be happening with a set of characters you're not going to see again. It's like so episodic, those films. But I enjoy because it shows this idea of Italy on the brink of absolute chaos, like, and just and that's part of the allure and the ridiculousness of those films. But in this one, it is tied a bit more to a narrative focusing just on these two, enemies, I guess, right? But no, yeah, no. For me, I guess this was all just pure mana. I just eat the shit up. It
I'm getting increasingly concerned about your lack of critical faculties. I have to admit.
I mean, I guess, if you've seen, like, if you grew up watching cops and robbers sorts of stuff, right? Because, like, if you go into this and you're like, okay, well, this isn't Contraband by Lucio Fulci. Well, yeah, no, it's not, because that's a few years later, first of all, and that's Lucio Fulci, and that's another thing, right? But
no, but still, I mean, there's the films that influence stuff like Dirty Harry or French Connection and stuff like that, right? I mean, you just can't compare, right? Like, just the entertainment levels are sufficiently lower, right? I mean,
well, I think that is a highly subjective attitude. I don't know that
you could objectively say that this is a much lesser film than both Dirty Harry and French Connection.
Maybe French Connection. I don't know that I would necessarily fully agree. I think Dirty Harry has lots of chunks that are less engaging. Yeah, there's the opening scene is amazing. At the end is amazing, but there's lots of bits in the middle that are just fine.
It's all great. I've never had a problem with really. Okay. I've never heard of anyone finding Dirty Harry boring before.
Yeah, no, it's intermittently great, but I don't think it's great front to back.
I worry more now. You haven't put my mind at rest at all.
Perfect. Just a last thing or two about Milano Rovente. Shit, no, actually, I had things I was going to say, and now I think I might have forgotten what they were. So maybe.
Thank God for
that. Yes, no, I was going to say. So we talked about trigger warnings before, right?
Oh yes.
And so I do feel like there's a couple. Well, obviously, violence towards women is going to be a trigger warning for most of the Lenzi filmography. Probably should have gotten ahead of that way. Maybe during the matinee era there wasn't as much of it, but certainly from Giallo here on out, we're going to see a lot of it. But in this film, we begin to see something that's going to rear its ugly head over and over again in these later Polizio films, right? Which is a strain of rampant macho homophobia.
Oh yes, we did forget to mention that. Yeah,
and that's something that you're going to see. You're going to see it in Manhunt coming up in our next thing. You're going to see it, and it's all over the place. It's you see it.
There's a transvestite character who is humiliated, right? Is what it is, right? And
it turns out that our other lead villain or whatever he is, Philippe Leroy. So Philippe Leroy is an actor who I know from other stuff, but I can't remember why. I know he's in a few of these type of films, but I feel like he's obviously French.
Yeah.
But anyway, you don't know what else he's in that we should know.
Stellar research there, Nick.
Okay, excellent. You're my go-to. You are the hard drive of all of this shit, as far as I'm concerned. Having written a book this big, which is part one of your endless fucking Sisyphus type odyssey. What
I wanted to say about that scene as well is, I think the reason that it might be potentially problematic is because, like you said, our protagonist is this asshole, and you're not quite sure. It's very difficult to judge when they are humiliating that character. It's really difficult to tell if you're supposed to be on side with them or feel sorry for him, or if it's just supposed to be just a moral kind of grey ground. So it's odd. It's uncomfortable because you don't quite know what the intent of the filmmaker is, right?
Yep.
So I'm glad you did bring that up, because it's worth bringing up, because it is one of the bits of the film that stood out, not in a good way, but was notable.
It jumps out at you, and then and as I said, when we get to Manhunt, I think we have to unpack it a bit more because there's a character who it becomes quite central to the plot, who is sort of what we would now call transgendered, and that character has some awful things happen to them, and it's really hard to figure out what the film is doing and why it's doing it. So, and it's weird and unpleasant. So yeah, it is, and then it shows up even in things as like innocuous as like the Cop and Blue Jeans films and stuff like that, like you know, which are almost comedies, and yet there's still this like thread of homophobic jokes, gay bashing stuff.
To be fair, this was across the world, as in the United States as well, right? I mean,
yes,
a transgender or gay character would have been the butt of a joke,
right?
Would have been the acceptable norm. Actually, until relatively recently, actually, it's not that far back in the past that that would be kind of played for laughs, right?
Yes, yeah. But in this case, sometimes in this case, there's an uglier side to it, right? Which shows up in these films, which is, it's more than just, there's an active humiliation sort of stuff going on. So it's so be warned. That stuff is rough. Okay, so we're on to
1973. SPASMO.
Yeah, not a title you'd probably get away with also now. Is there, what was the actual, was that the actual title in?
I think it is.
I think it is the title in Italian, So worth mentioning that this has a cracking little score by Ennio Morricone, which bleeds over a little bit into the score of Almost Human, where it feels like he might have written right back to back, because there's a lot of similar discordant kind of noisy saxophone and kind of screeching. I don't know.
I noticed Morricone on the ground, and then I was primed for it, but I have to admit the soundtrack didn't necessarily jump out at me. I'm not saying it's not a cracking one, as you said, but it didn't quite.
His giallo soundtracks are something else. I feel like there's certain, and we'll talk about this more next episode. There's certain film scorers whose best work is often with like one genre, right? So I would argue that you know, the best spaghetti western film score is Ennio Morricone. There's a few others who are in the running, but he's out there. But maybe, you know, the best Polizio film score is probably Franco Michalizzi, with the Giallis brothers as a close second. But yeah, so in this case, you know, and giallo really, Goblin probably stakes it out. Once they start doing them, they are, when I think of a truly great giallo soundtrack, I think of Deep Red. You know, I think of
Eurocrime is the D'Angelis brothers, right?
D'Angelis brothers and Franco Michalizzi. They're the two.
It's always funny to me as well that it's funny how you come to these things. There's a whole clutch of people. If you mention Morricone, they'll go like, "Oh, The Mission, beautiful," and I'm like, "Oh, really? That's always the stuff on the best of comp by Skip."
yes, exactly.
Kind of
pan flutes. Move on.
It's funny though, but for a lot of people, that is right. That is what Morricone is, right? It's like I'm not having a go at that, but I'm just saying it's amazing. I
agree. I don't get the. Although I will say it's funny. One of his ones that also will show the same kind of people might be aware of, and I won't disagree with them, is the soundtrack to Once Upon a Time in America, which for some reason can occasionally reduce me to tears. Just the music. It's got that nostalgic. It's those scenes when they're little kids growing up in the tenements. The scene with the cakes.
The cakes. With the cake. With the film, I agree. I think if you listen to it divorced from the images, it's a little too sentimental.
A bit cloying. Yeah.
Yeah, but it works. It certainly works, and that's what soundtrack music has. I mean, it's quite interesting actually. This is something I think about quite a lot. Is you'll see a film, and you'll think, "What amazing soundtrack." And then you'll get the soundtrack and you realize, oh, I shouldn't be listening to this by itself because it's not what it's designed for. And then some other soundtracks, which are amazing listens on their own, they overwhelm the film. They're too much. So the art of the soundtrack is quite a tricky thing to pull off.
Yes,
because you don't want to overwhelm
Yes,
and they're not designed to be listened to without the film, right? So yeah, it's kind of interesting to think about that. Anyway, Spasmo.
Yes,
Yeah.
Spasmo. We
Again,
got Robert Hoffman.
oh, yeah, fucking hell. Who? Austrian. Actually, I don't mind Robert Hoffman, especially when he shaved his beard off. Because before he shaved his beard off, I'm thinking, isn't that Richard Chamberlain?
Yeah, yes. And after he shaves it off, I thought, isn't that Jason Bateman from Arrested Development? Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Just
you weren't wearing your spectacles this day, obviously.
No. I stand by this. I'll stand by that. So yeah, he is our lead, and we got Susie Kendall, who's no relation to Felicity, right?
Not that I know of.
Okay.
Yeah. I always think of I'm sorry, not to do a disservice, but because I quite like Susie Kendall, but I always think of her a little bit as, well, we couldn't get Susan George, so is Susan Kendall available?
And it's funny you say that, because like when I first started watching the movie, I almost thought like, that's not Susan George from like Pieces, is it? And then I was like, no, hang on, it's
Susan George isn't in Pieces.
Wait, isn't she? Who's in?
You're thinking of Linda Day George.
Linda Day George. You are correct, sir. Yes, different George entirely.
While you were watching Spasmo, you were like, "That's not that person," and it wasn't. But it wasn't the person you thought.
It wasn't because I was thinking of either. No,
okay.
No. Anyway, so do you want to unpack this one for us as much as one can unpack this one? This one's pretty bonkers.
What happens in this one? Oh yeah, so this is the one. Robert Hoffman. And it's all set in Tuscany, right? Some really beautiful locations. In this film. I mean, for whole parts of this film, I was like, just stop telling this stupid fucking story and point the camera at this nice
that sea view.
I'd much rather just watch that. It'd been good if the film had just halfway through the camera just drifted off and like people like and it just fucked off and just showed you some nice
became a travelogue of Tuscany.
I'd have enjoyed that.
Some nice tiles.
But so basically he meets this kind of mysterious Susie Kendall character
face down in the sand on the beach, looking like she's dead.
When he first meets her. And at the same time there's a spate of mannequins being found. People think they're dead bodies and they turn out to be mannequins, and then someone steals their car while they're looking at the mannequin. So he ends up he's got the hots for Susie Kendall.
Immediately throws over his actual girlfriend. Yes, but immediately throws over his actual girlfriend, like just like which is hilarious.
She turns up later and she's quite attractive, actually.
Oh yeah, she is.
She's like an artist or something, isn't she? I quite liked her. But and so he ends up kind of, and she insists that he shave his beard off before they fuck, so they go back to his place. Some dude breaks in and tries to shoot him. So he ends up
a skeevy little Dario Argento kind of lookalike guy. Comes in with a gun and with a silencer on it, and they struggle in the bathroom of this motel they're in, and then he shoots him. Our hero shoots him, and then freaks the fuck out and is like, "We got to get out of here." They run away.
I think that man was walking past, looked in the window, and he said, "Oh, it's my favorite actor, Richard Chamberlain. I'm going to go in." And then, in the meantime, the beard came off, and he was confused, and then he pulled his gun, and then so he ends up dead, and then they run away, and they come back, and the body's missing.
Body's gone. Some blood splats.
And then Susie Kendall literally turns up out of nowhere while he seems to have driven quite far away from where she is, and then she suddenly just strolls into his car, and the dialogue does go something like, "How the hell did you get here?" "Oh, I was just walking past," or something. It's like, and it's one of the problems I have with this film is like, if it was all that, if it was that level of dream logic throughout, I wouldn't have a problem with it because it would be of a piece. But the problem is, it's sometimes that, And then other times it's boringly rational. Or trying
Right.
to be. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
This seems to be that point to me where the giallo starts going from the whodunit into this more kind of psychedelic dream territory. Because later on, they almost don't bother with the joining all the dots of the because it doesn't matter. You're just interested in linking from set piece to set piece, that it doesn't get boring, right? And I feel with this film a little bit, it was like, logic be damned, let's just have kind of a loopy series of images, or but the trouble is it's again they didn't crank it up, right? So it's in this boring between two stools kind of thing, because the whole thing with the mannequin, so obviously it turns out it's basically mind game. So they end up going to her. She has a friend who lives in this ridiculously cool, like fucking what even is that?
Cliffside castle turret tower thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Cool,
and they break into as well. I love this. She's like, "Oh, my friends went on holiday. Oh, I guess we'll have to smash the window with your with your car jack." And he's just like, "All right."
Yeah.
Like, he's just kind of dragged in the wake.
He does all the dangerous breaking glass and put it. I noticed he doesn't do much. She's always wondering about doing stuff, and he's a bit useless, really, isn't he? The Robert Hoffman character. And then it turns out there's someone else living there as well as a father and his hot daughter, Monica Monet.
Yes. Yeah, Malcolm and Clorinda.
Yeah. Yeah, and then it's just it's an increasingly kind of it's a series of red herrings where obviously
everyone's winding him up, right? That's
it's all mind games.
We start to get this. We start as the movie goes, and we're like, hang on, everyone seems to be in on some kind of thing to wind him up to fever pitch. They're trying to push him towards having a nervous breakdown. Right,
but you're not quite sure who's on whose side and
why.
Until Ivan Razimov turns up. And then
immediately you're like, oh, hang on, it's the Razimov. Yep.
And then we have a bit more of an idea about where this is kind of
the motive, I guess.
Yeah. Nice poster. I'll give it that. The film has a very nice poster. But no. This is unfortunately, I hate to do this. I don't want to be the grumpy who doesn't like all these films.
A negative Nelly.
It pretty much is a fail again. I mean, how did you get on with this one then, Nick? Is this one again? Are you going to say it's amazing? It's the best film ever, or did this one not quite do it for you?
It was fine. It was fine. I wouldn't go so far as to say this is a great giallo. I wouldn't go so far as to say it's one of his Lenz's better giallos.
It's interesting though. It's one of the ones I feel quite early. So I think unless you saw these things when they were in theaters when they were new, and maybe not that, because a lot of them, I think this one did play the US, but I feel the giallo fandom. So we mentioned earlier how, obviously some people saw them when they were new, people like Sean S. Cunningham and John Carpenter and fairly slasher thing. But I feel as if the fandom that kind of exists now in the larger horror community is something that was born of the 90s.
Yes. Yeah.
When these things started to come out on DVD, right? I feel as if there's more of a proper giallo fandom. And Spasmo, the way I remember, Spasmo seems to me to have been one of the first ones. Like, for whatever reason, I remember this coming out early on as a DVD and then later a Blu-ray. So it's always kind of been about, and therefore has garnered a slight cult, if only for the title and visibility rather than the actual content. Right. And this was the first time I'd seen it. So it's interesting. So that's the thing in my head. Again, because they came around at the same time.
Yes, the same time. Yeah.
Because Spasmo, it's kind of the same thing until you settle down to watch one, and then you realize, oh no, one is actually really, really very good, and the other one is what I was afraid these people right? Which is just
I wonder too if maybe some of the reason that this film is, you've got Susie Kendall, right, who is in Bird of the Crystal Plumage, right?
Yes,
She's kind of she became a bit of a giallo mainstay. Is she even in Torso? I think later on, maybe.
Might be, yeah. I forget.
Yeah, with Luke Miranda. Now, talking about wooden actors, Luke Miranda is at the top of my list of like, whew. Yeah, there's one film of his that I like, that I think is good in, and that's about it. But then it's also got Ivan Rasimov, who is in a crap ton of the better Sergio Martino giallos, things like, you know.
It is worth mentioning, it's funny, as soon as Ivan Rasimov turns up in this film, I'm immediately more interested, though. The man does have...
Oh, I know. He's electric.
Like this, the camera loves him.
Right? Yes, yeah.
There's just something automatically better if Ivan Rasimov is in something.
Yeah, no.
And he does kind of have the final twist, which is kind of amusing. But again, it's only amusing because it's Ivan Rasimov. It's not actually
right.
a particularly great twist, but somehow it just
he sells it.
Yeah,
he totally sells it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny. I agree with you. I feel like this, if this had been directed by Jodorowsky, if this had been directed by Jodorowsky and David Lynch, it would be better, because I think you're right. I think they would have thrown out the parts of the script that have those rational.
Yeah, I think they've gone full. They'd have gone full on like Lost Highway or something about it, right? Like,
because it does have those elements. It could go that way.
Yeah,
When it has this dream logic, as you pointed out in these early parts, where they're trying to drive him mad, where people are getting killed and then suddenly showing up again, still alive, and you're like, what's going on here? But then it gets very prosaic in that last act when they're like, oh no, there's a reason for all of this. You know, this is a plan to do this. So yeah, I agree. But but the thing is, like, when I'm watching the movie, in those segments, I didn't know what was going on, because I don't think I saw this. This is one I don't think I saw back then either. I think this is the first view for me as well. And so I was just like, oh yeah, this is weird. This is enjoyably odd. Like, these things aren't connecting up very well. And I think Eyeball, which we'll get to in a few minutes here, I think by that point he has thrown in the towel, because that film, I think, is a parody.
Well,
I don't think Lenzi is taking that at all seriously.
We'll get there. So interesting thing about this, I noticed again a bit of IMDb trivia, which I'm not sure if someone totally made up for. So George A. Romero was said to have directed insert footage for this film. Apparently 10 minutes of insert footage for some murders or something, right? Now, I don't buy this, just because, well, it's certainly not in this film that we watched, right? Nope. If it's 10 minutes, number one, there isn't actually that, it's not a particularly gory film, actually. So there isn't 10 minutes of murder footage to be found in it anyway, right?
No.
But apparently, so the other thing you might think, oh, so maybe it's that version, but I find it very hard. I think if there was 10 minutes directed by George A. Romero of anything, you know about it. Someone would have put it on an extra or something, or we would be lamenting the fact that it was lost forever, right? Because you can even see his fucking TV commercials on extras on discs or something.
Yes, you know, you're right, yeah.
But apparently it's a bit of IMDb, and I don't know if someone just put that up as a lark and no one ever bothered to fact check it, or if I would be amazed if that turned out to be true.
The year doesn't make a lot of sense to me either.
No,
I mean, because it's well before he enters into his relationship with Claudio Argento, and you know,
it's just an odd, like, why would you even? It doesn't, like, even if you don't enjoy it, it's not like a film where you'd go, we need to add 10 minutes of murder scenes and this would be great. Like, so I'm calling bullshit on this particular little bit of IMDb trivia.
I
and obviously it's new to you. It's not what I mean. As I thought maybe you might say, oh yeah, I remember hearing that already, but you haven't. Right.
Never heard that before, and I've read a fair amount about Romero over the years, and that's
We'll forget about that then.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, here we go. Nick's gonna cut his pants now. It's almost human.
Yes, yes, it is. Which, you know, just to get ahead of this, this is a perfect example of where criticism of Lenzi, you know, often depends on a total misunderstanding of what the intent was, right? And in this case, in the case of Almost Human, that's down to Joseph A. Brenner, who I'm sure you're aware, released this
in the States, right?
In the States, with a poster and a trailer that was massively misleading, right?
Yes, yes, that kind of alien-looking thing on the poster.
Yeah, the green eyes and so on.
Right,
yeah, right. And so, I mean, you know, and the fact of the matter is that the title "Almost Human" is not something that's obviously an English title, right? The
no, the original is Milano odia la polizia non può sparare.
Yeah, exactly. Which is like, you know, so like whatever, like odious Milan or whatever the hell that, or Milan hate the police cannot shoot.
Oh, like that, right? I thought it's odious Milan. The police have some spare poo.
Could be that. But you know, well, so, I mean, but here's the thing, you might actually agree with this. Surprisingly timid crime thriller from the cannibal man himself, Umberto Cannibal Ferox, doomed to die. Lenzi, low-ranking mafia hitman, botches a kidnapping, then double-crosses his partners, which is not actually true, and kills his hostage before being gunned down in agonizing ultra-slow motion by an intrepid police inspector. Lots of shootings, but no splatter, no squibs, no nothing. Could safely play on network TV without cuts.
Well, that's not quite right. He doesn't get gunned down in slow motion, and there's no squibs.
And I question, could safely play on network TV without cuts, given some of what's intimated in this film and correctly shown. But, you know, it's given like 1/2 a skull and a 1 out of 10 on the gore score. Fine, gore score. It's not a gore film. It's not a horror film at all. This is the Deep Red.
Okay.
Right. But so this is one of these cases where Lenzi has this, you know, people blame him.
Yes,
for this thing, right?
I totally agree with you. And that's not, if I have a problem, that's nothing to do with my problem.
I know. Okay.
Because I was aware of that.
You're coming to this on its own merits, but still not much enjoying it on its own merits.
No. I think the thing I have a little bit is maybe the difference between you and me, and this is not necessarily a good and bad thing. It's just a different approach. And sometimes I'm envious of your ability to do this. And I think it's the subjective objective thing, right? I cannot turn off my objective thing when I watch that. I just can't do it. I've been doing it too long, right? Because I feel when you're watching a film, if there's something that just tickles you, you are able to go with it to a degree where you're going to your happy place. You're finding what you like about it.
Oh yes,
and that's good. Like you're more interested in getting enjoyment out of it. Like if it's there, than I'm unable to do. I can appreciate it, but I can't help but be boring and step back. And so the thing with Almost Human, and we'll get to the story now. But the thing with Almost Human is, as a film, as a thriller, it's not bad. It's not bad, right? However, if you like Thomas Milian, it's a whole heap of fun. I'll give you that. It is a whole heap of fun. But I would be disingenuous if I said that doesn't mean that the film as a whole is a really good film, because I don't think it is a really good. It's fine. It's okay. There's much worse. There's much better. But really what you're watching, the thing that makes this worth watching is Thomas Milian. Otherwise, you wouldn't really bother with it as a kind of police procedural. The Henry Silva Dirty Harry stuff at the end is. I like Henry Silva. Don't get me wrong, but without Thomas Milian, you wouldn't be talking about this film, right? Oh
yeah, no, that is absolutely true. I mean, I think there's a few other. I mean, there's a few other films that I think fit this category in the Polizio thing. Mad Dog Murderer. Is it Sergio Greco, Helmut Berger, whatever you say his name. Yeah. There's a few of these where they take and I was thinking about like
the Tarantini one, isn't it? That one.
I want to say Sergio Greco, but whatever. We can look this up later on. Anyway, Mad Dog Murderer. I feel like the Tarantini one that I always think about is the Stunt Squad or whatever it is, the one where they're riding motorbikes around. But So,
sorry, I threw you off your.
yeah, my brain just needs to.
I think you were going to say like subcategory of psychopath.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I was thinking about this, like, what is that? You know, and I suppose it's the old Warner Brothers things, right? Like, what is the Rosetta Stone for this stuff, right? Where like the cops,
Public Enemy,
cops are pushed. So this is a crime film where the cops are pushed so far to the margin that how many minutes of this is Henry Silva actually in? Like 6 minutes, right? It's almost exclusively a sweating, like lip smacking, performance by Thomas Millian. And so, but I was, so I'm thinking like, so where does this come from? But I guess it comes from things like the original Scarface, right?
Well, it's also but it's also again Dirty Harry is the Scorpio Killer, right? It's Andy Robertson Scorpio Killer is basically the
but there's a hell of a lot of Clint Eastwood in Dirty Harry.
No. But I think they took, but it's weird. It's like they took,
but it's expanding. So where you're
they expanded the Scorpio bit and they shrunk the Dirty Harry stuff, right? Yeah.
But like, it's like, but really, like, I mean, effectively, the protagonist of this film is Thomas Millian.
Yeah, they could have called it almost Harry. Actually, would have been a good.
That would have been a good title. But yeah, I just like where you front and center your villain, right? I mean, like the Cagney films, the Edward G. Robinson things. Yeah. So this, to me, this is an updated version of that. Where
agreed. That's
but scummier again. Although I will admit, some of those old films are surprising when Cagney mashes that fucking grapefruit in what's her face's face. It is jarring.
Linda Day George.
Yeah, that's the one. Linda Day George. Yeah. Anyway, so we've got Millian playing a character called Giulio Sacchi. He is a absolute piece of shit. There's a thing, and I tried to find it. I'm going to find it for the next time we talk. I wrote this ridiculously highfalutin essay for Cinemuerte back when I was in my early 20s and at university doing film studies, which I would imagine I would have a hard time even reading now and maybe understanding what I had written because it's so far in the past. But I did this whole essay on the Italian crime film and class politics, right? And these Millian roles in these films and in some other films that he does around this time they are interesting, right? Because there's always this weird, like, not justification, but semi-justification based in class for why he's such a piece of shit.
Well, what's interesting in this film, he's not the public, he's not the Scarface, he's not the Little Caesar. He's way below those people, right? Because he's being kicked around by all those people, right? They don't take him seriously at all, right? He's like he's the guy who finally goes postal, right? He's like the guy who gets kicked around until someone puts a machine gun in his hand, right? And then Steve Buscemi might have played the part later on.
But I feel like, so yeah, I mean, this film opens, it's perfect, right? It opens up with him part of this gang with an actor who you and I talked about when we talked about Black Jesus. And I mentioned that Luciano Catanacci is an actor that I quite like. He's going to show up in a lot of these now, playing these kind of like thuggish, he's instantly recognizable. He's kind of bald and just kind of blocky looking dude. But so he's the leader of this gang. They do this bank hit, and it's a perfect encapsulation of what we're going to see Millian do over and over in this film, right? So basically a guy comes up to him and says like, you're double parked, can you? And he's just 0 to 60, right? Yeah. And you're like, oh, okay. And then so they run away, and then we also see that great scene where there's a dude with a wonderful mustache. It's actually the guy who was combing his mustache in Milano Rovente or Milan Gang War. He's in the car. He's holding the kid that kidnapped. Who's weeping in the back of the car as they run away. And this includes a scene. So
viewers, just in case you don't understand what I mean, this is going on, right? This is the subjective thing, the mustache, etc. this is an example, right? This is
This
and
is-
again, I'm
yeah.
not having a go at it. I'm just this is
No.
a good time to point out exactly what I mean is when you get carried
Yes,
up into
your-
something. This is how
Your
it goes.
mileage,
Yeah.
your mileage may vary on some of this stuff.
To be
Absolutely.
fair, as well, it does usually revolve around mustaches. I think you have an unhealthy
mustache
obsession
fetish.
with mustaches, considering you don't even have a mustache or ever had a mustache. I don't think, have you?
I grew one to take a series of photographs of myself where I was pretending to be Maurizio Merli once.
Why don't you just grow a mustache, Nick? You clearly want to have one.
I think there'd be too much grey in it now. It'd be more Sam Elliott than Maurizio Merli at this point. So no.
I think your life maybe I don't know about your wife; she might not like it, but you clearly are jonesing for some more mustache in your life.
That action.
Yeah,
could be true. Could be true. So, I mean, yes. I mean, Sabato. I would imagine that's why you enjoyed Sabato's performance more in.
he has a mustache.
Bangor. He has a mustache. He's way more Burt Reynolds in that film than he was in the previous giallo we watched him in. But so yes, they're tearing away. But there's a scene here that is important to fans of Umberto Lenzi crime films because it's the first use of a piece of footage that we'll see over and over again. That's not even from one of his movies.
Oh, is this the bit from The Violent Professionals?
That's the one,
right?
Where they even.
Car.
Yeah, where they even. How did you know about this, or have we talked about this before 9 times?
No. It says, to be fair, it looked vaguely familiar, and then while researching, it does say on the IMDb, edited in footage from The Violent Professionals.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
I wasn't aware that it happens after this again and again, though.
Oh yes, at least twice.
Okay.
And so, but what I love about this one is they have the excuse of they're in their black getaway car, and then they jump out of it and run over to a car that will match the footage they're about to steal.
Right.
I was like, yes, genius.
It is funny because it's not as if because it's really short as well. I think it's less than like 2-3 seconds, right? A shot.
Oh yeah, it's just they want that shot of the car leaping over, going through the burning crates, and then back over to the other side.
But they clearly really thought that would improve their box office. But it's pretty blink or miss. I mean, I can imagine someone turning around to do and not seeing it, right? So it's an interesting, thing that they would decide to. I mean, this film would suffer nothing if you removed it, right?
Oh, I don't know about that. I quite like.
You got addicted to seeing it, right?
That's true. I do love to see it.
But if it wasn't in there, it wouldn't really change the overall. Thing. Sorry, I'm being Mr. Boring Objective again, but yeah, it's curious to me. I why they went out of their way to put it in.
Yeah, because it took effort. They had to literally shoot scenes of them changing.
Well, that's what I mean. Is like if it had just cut to the footage, like those Antonio Margheriti films that have the toy car chases edited into them, that would be one thing, right? But yeah, like you said, they had to go to the effort to find a car that matched and film that and everything. So it does seem like quite a lot of effort for something most people maybe notice.
For about 6 frames of film. Yeah. So anyway, so pretty much Thomas Millian gets slapped around a bit by the bosses for having screwed up the robbery. And then the rest of the film is he comes up with this plan. He's going to kidnap the daughter of his girlfriend's rich boss, right? So he gets Ray Lovelock, who we've just recently seen making porn, and another guy, Gino Santacole, I think maybe.
Yeah, not overly familiar with him, but not a famous. The girlfriend in question is Anita Strindberg, who's interesting. One of those performers who wasn't in that much, but somehow seems to have made a bit of a mark, right? Like she's notable. It's Anita. I don't know why exactly, but I note. Anita Strindberg's in this, and and she's and the boss is played by Guido Alberti, and the daughter Merlu is Laura Belli, right?
Yes, yeah.
It's funny. I was looking at her IMDb page as well, and some of the plot descriptions of things and pictures and photos, and this girl was kidnapped a lot in films. I feel like most of the pictures of the IMDb have her with like a gag in her mouth or tied up or something.
Typecast.
Yeah.
And so but yeah, again, it just we see scene after scene of Millian just gurning outrageously just pulling the most ridiculous. Every time I did a screen cap for this film, I got something gold. Like,
also worth mentioning, Laura Bailey in tennis whites.
Yes. And so yeah, this is all the scene where he's stealing money out of the cigarette machine, and then the guy taps him on the shoulder, is like, "Oh, hey," and he immediately stabs him. And then we get the great, like the few really wonderful wooden faced Silva things. He's like,
yes,
he killed him for 600 lira.
Yeah, it's an interesting because yeah, I mean, I'm not familiar enough with the arc of Henry Silva, like his earlier career and before he went to Italy and all. So I'm not quite sure exactly when did he start doing this. My face is paralyzed.
I think from the get-go. I don't know.
I have a feeling of Henry Silva, like in America earlier on. I have a feeling that he emoted a bit more, maybe, than, I don't know, did he contract some kind of disease, or was he addicted to something, or did he just decide, yeah, I'm done with that, acting stuff,
facial motility stuff. Yeah. I'm just gonna
interesting. Or did he
remember
just,
everything through?
like, fall in love with?
Again, it's perfect in this. It's perfect. It's perfect in the way that Jean-Marie Volonté and Clint Eastwood are perfect. Right. Dial it back and push it out. Right. You wouldn't want him giving you Maurizio in this, because you've got way too much.
But it does give him this very weird character. Like, he seems less a policeman investigating the case. He seems more like this perpetually curious man who, like, happens to be walking past or something, and like every scene he's in, he like goes in and he just looks like a little bit puzzled by everything that's being. It's just it's a very weird kind of. He just looks a bit confused and maybe slightly troubled, but I never get the sense that he's really, like, even the spoilers when he guns him down, on some garbage, kind of.
It's a great ending.
Yeah,
I think.
I mean, even then, he doesn't seem particularly, like, if he's taking revenge, he's not really relishing it.
No. Agreed. It's definitely like it's almost a perfunctory kind of like functional thing. He's got to put this trash down, but he's not. He's not very invested in. And I understand. I suppose what he's trying to go for is world weary or something, like nothing. But rather than world weary, like I said, he just looks like someone's just let him out the box for the first time. He's grumpy and confused. Grumpy and confused. I mean, he does do that nice 0 to 100 though every now and again, where he just, and that's something I like about Silva, because he will kind of make you jump, because he's dubbing these, right? And when he dubs them, there's two things. Like he doesn't he never uses contractions, which I find fascinating. Right? He never does in any films I've seen. I've never seen him use a contraction.
Yeah.
And he has the most distinctive way of saying motherfucker.
Yes.
Which shows up in a couple of movies.
Yeah, and it's quite a lot. It's surprising when he does it as well, because they're like, oh, okay, Henry. But what's interesting, if he's dubbing himself as well, then one assumes that he must be watching back his performances. And so clearly he must be thinking, I'm doing a grand job, because he carries on like, so he must be pleased with what he's doing. Like, this is that's exactly what I meant to do. I nailed that cigar store wooden Indian performance.
So yeah, anyway, I love what he's bringing to the table, and I like how restrained the movie is in using him, right? He just shows up every now and again to remind you that he's still in the film and he's still upset about this Giulio piece of shit.
Mildly perturbed.
Yes. So what I also noticed when watching all of these, because as much as possible, and this is one place where I can see there being differences of opinion, right? Do you watch Italian genre film in English, or do you watch it in Italian with English subtitles, right?
Right.
And my argument has been for a long time, you watch it in English. if you can.
Yeah, I mean,
uh,
so I'm assuming Henry Silva would have been where he's performing in English.
yes.
Thomas Milian probably was as well.
Not in this. No, you'll know. Like, I mean, I'll know because I'm obsessed with him. I'll know when it's him and when it's a dubber. He had certain dubbers who dubbed him into English more consistently than others. Unless so, in the spaghetti westerns, in Compañeros, in Run Man Run, in all of them actually, to Pepa, it's always him dubbing his own voice. So it seems like when he.
Aside from the dubbing, what I mean is, I wasn't so much but that is an interesting point to bring up.
Yep.
Thank you. But what I mean is he doing his performance in English though?
Yes. So he's all of his dialogue mouth in English. Yes.
Yeah.
And then he was always dubbed into Italian by a guy called Ferruccio Amendola. So it's funny when you watch a Thomas Milian movie. There's no point unless you're watching one of the spaghetti westerns. There's no point in watching the Italian dub if you're thinking, well, I'm going to get his voice, because you're not. You're going to get an Italian dubber in the Italian, and you're going to get an English dubber in the English version.
So so you're saying in the spaghetti westerns he performed
except for the spaghetti westerns
Italian, not in English?
I don't know. I'd like to know that, but he definitely did his English dubbing in the spaghetti westerns.
Did he speak Italian? I'm assuming he probably.
Yes. Yeah, he lived there for many years.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And in fact,
I think you lived in Japan for many years.
That's true. Yeah. No, he did. He did speak Italian. And then he would often ad lib as well. So apparently they would always have a tape recorder on recording, because when he would ad lib, then the Italian dubber would have to do whatever he had done. Right.
This is a romantic comedy, Thomas. I don't think you should have ad libbed machine gunning your bride to death in that scene. So yes. we'll take that again.
The last thing I want to say about the dubbing that I've noticed because what I was doing with these ones was watching them with the English dubbing on, but the Italian, like with the subtitles for the Italian version, I was watching them both and paying attention to where they don't sync up. And it was interesting to me. For example, did you notice in the Gang War Milan one, there's the whole part where he first meets Marissa Mel's character, and he's in a club, and she's getting harassed by some guy. And in the English dub, the guy's got a German accent. And Marissa Mel's she's English, I think, in this, in that, right? And then he has a line where he says like, "Oh yeah, I can't stand the German accent." But in the Italian version, the subtitles are totally different, and it's clear that guy is English. And I actually went and listened to just that section, and that whole section is a different voice dubber in English, and it's a British voice actor doing that character, and he says, "I can't stand to hear people talking in English." And I was like, well, I guess that wasn't going to fly in the international version of the film, so when they dubbed it into English, they took that out. But what I've also noticed is there's more swearing and there's more weird stuff in the English versions, far more than in the Italian.
Right.
And it's really clear in Almost Human.
Yeah.
Because that whole, like when he says like, you know what I'm going to do when I get this money? I'm going to wash my hot dog in champagne every day. Like all that stuff is like not nearly as clear in the Italian language version.
And every time he says shithead, in the original, it's actually questionable fellow.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think it's chicken is actually what it is in the because again I watched it with the and so it's weird. I think you're getting a more authentic and a more fun version if you watch them in English.
Right. Well, certainly, at least you're not. The main point is you're not ignoring like an authentic experience in film. Because
I think that is I honestly think that is the authentic experience.
As close as you're going to get anyway, like as good as I don't know, some of these, I mean, that's the thing, it's interesting. Who was telling me recently, my friend Bernd was telling me about, so back in the day they even had in Germany, they would have had different dubbers for when things were released in the East and the West.
Right.
And some of the dubs for the East German market have been lost over the years. And people who grew up watching those versions really miss those dubs because some people became known for, like here in Japan, for example, the guy who does Rupan is famous for Clint Eastwood.
Yes.
Right? So you have different connotations, what you expect someone to sound like, right? So, yeah, sometimes people can get on their high horse a little bit about the sub-dub thing, and they don't. I get what they mean. In general, you should probably watch things in as close to the original,
Yeah.
to get the flavor of it. But some people,
But if the
they don't know what
shooting
they're
script-
talking about, right? They don't know what
Yeah,
they're
and
talking.
if the shooting script was in English and
Exactly, and
everyone almost is mouthing in English,
yeah, or
then
just talking
why
whatever
is
the fuck language they want and just
exactly
talking across each other, then there is no authentic experience. So you
Mhm.
just go with what you enjoy, right? What
Sorry,
works.
before I forget, I did want to jump back to who was the freaking terrifying kid in the Super 8 footage from the, you know, because they have that. So Ivan Rasimov's character watches a bunch of home movies, and there's this little blonde kid, like who just he was awesome. I was like, who's that kid? Anyway,
Okay, I don't
forget about it.
Yeah. So yeah, we've danced around it. So let's talk about what MILAN did. Well, MILAN in this film, I mean, he forces hostages to give him blowjobs. He
Yes,
machine
yes.
guns people like left, right, and center for no good reason. Shoots
Yep.
kid. I mean, yeah, no, he's really a force. He
pushes his own girlfriend off of a cliff in her own little car after he's borrowed it to do the kidnapping.
Yes. And then a touch I particularly like is when he's on the most wanted list, goes to the local police station to report his girlfriend missing, and does this whole act.
Crocodile tears.
That's great. That whole sequence is fantastic.
Oh, he's a scumbag. And you know, and the other thing I love it is that he genuinely, like at the end as well, he seems genuinely upset that Silva's shown up to execute him. He's like, he has this idea of fairness, you know, like that applies to him and him alone, you know, and there's so much of him feeling sorry for himself and like whining and whinging.
Yeah, he's a total coward, right? He's a total craven, cowardly little piece of shit, is what he is.
Yeah.
And someone was stupid enough to give him a machine gun.
He's man, he's like, it's a performance that really like shows that's an actor who doesn't give a shit what people are going to think about me after this film. Like,
so I'm really hard now, Nick. Try really, really hard, like that. Okay. What do you think, MILAN aside? What do you think of this film critically? Like, do you think it is actually a really great film or not? Or are you able to do it?
It's so stacked with me for things that I want, right? So so it doesn't just have MILAN in one of his defining piece of shit performances and where he takes up 90% of the running time just pulling the most outrageous faces. But it also has Henry Silva, right? Who I have an 8x10 glossy of somewhere in the house, you know, another of my absolute favorites. So yeah, I don't know that I can tease this apart, because to me, a movie is more than just this movie is maybe less than the sum of its parts. The parts themselves are so satisfying to me that I'm not really concerned that yeah, fine, it's probably not the greatest thriller ever made.
So you can see, you can at least see that, you can kind of appreciate. Yes. Right. Okay.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. But for me, it's near perfect in its scumminess, in its I mean, you know, you didn't even mention, but like it's hilarious, that scene where they do break into the rich people's home and he's, you know, he forces them to give him a blowjob at gunpoint while he's unzipping his friend's pants and talking about you believe in universal brotherhood, right? But then he makes the balding glasses wearing dude give him head, and he's like, he basically says like, we don't believe in sexual discrimination here or whatever. He's like, what is happening? And these are the things that I know you've watched a lot of trash, as I've watched a lot of trash, right? So yes, this is not the most outrageous thing you're ever going to see, but this is just supposed to be, I assume this is just supposed to be a cops and robbers film. In the same way that Warriors of the Wasteland is supposed to be a Mad Max ripoff, but at one point Luigi Montefiore bends over our Mad Max character and sodomizes him. And you're just like, why is this happening in a low-rent Mad Max film? Why did Enzo G. Castellari think that this was something that hunters wanted to see?
Here's the question. Does this come from Ernesto Gastaldi, the screenwriter? Does this come from Lens?
It does.
Does it come from Does it come from MILAN, or does it come from a combination of all of these things? Because I can just imagine MILAN.
On set being like, oh no, this guy.
From what I know about him, he was quite Strasbourg method-y as well, right? Like,
yes.
So I wouldn't be surprised if he was drinking and popping pills throughout the production.
He looks like shit. He's got like big dark circles under his eyes, like sweaty and twitchy, and I just said I can't. Critical distance has completely evaporated from me, and it's going to happen again a few times next episode. So when we get to Rome Armed to the Teeth, I'm not going to be even Brothers Till We Die, which is, I know, not a good film, but it's got MILAN playing 2 roles from other movies he's already been in, and it's just ridiculous.
So yes, in case you hadn't noticed, Nick is C. Thomas Howell's dad's #1 fan.
I am.
Yes.
So yeah, if you like your cops and robbers to be very grimy, very scummy, and more about robbers than cops, then I think Almost Human is probably a film for you. Weirdly enough, if I'm thinking, this one doesn't have a lot of particularly homophobic stuff in it, so at least you don't have to worry. I mean, I think, in fact, if anything, this movie leans the other direction slightly with its like, hey, anything goes attitude. So yeah.
So
not a happy ending. Not a happy ending, which I also appreciate.
So on we go to our final film.
Yep.
This outing. Eyeball. Or Gatti Rossi in Labirinto di Vetro.
Right.
Secret Killer.
That middle title sounds much more giallo-y than almost any of the other titles. Like, other than the Bloodstained Orchids, that's quite giallo-y.
Yes. There's a number, and there's a plant or an animal.
An animal, yeah.
Iguana'S Bumhole.
There we go.
So yeah, Italian Spanish. Apparently produced by Joseph Brenner this time, but I'm wondering if that's actually a after the fact executive producer credit.
Right.
They have it as producer on the and a score by Bruno Nicolai. Speaking of scoresters.
Yes, and that's one that I had forgotten because I saw this film ages ago and didn't remember any of it, but I did remember the score because I have that score on it. I bought a disc, a CD many years ago that had that score in its entirety and the score to Torso.
Yes, I think you then gave it to me.
Oh, there we go. Okay, so there we go. Yes.
No.
Yeah, and so it's still on my on my iPod. So it's the one that I listened to.
I came to the horrible conclusion that I've actually watched this fucking film 3 times.
Okay.
Now we should say once again, I mean, speaking of Brenner, Eyeball is a great fucking title. It's simple. It's like, you could overlook how, but it is just such a great title for Eyeball. It's, there we go, excellent. And again, I mean, this is the thing. So see, I listened to the commentary and I've heard, and you will, this has a huge fandom, and plenty of people will go out of their way to say it's like their favorite. It's crazy. It's over the top. It's wild. Woo, it's great fun. And I wish it was that. And that's the reason I've probably seen it 3 times, is because the title Eyeball and the way people explain what this film is about. Plus, the plot is a bunch of tourists on a package holiday in Barcelona. Someone starts killing them, removing their eyeballs, and they don't stop the holiday.
Yep.
And the killer just jumps out of nowhere at random times, in broad daylight, and removes this. If I say that, and it's title Eyeball, and people say it sounds like catnip. This should be like Pieces, right?
Yes.
See, that film lives up to its reputation.
Yes.
Pieces is batshit crazy, highly entertaining. See, I get that. I get the Pieces fandom because it does.
Yeah.
But people will talk about Eyeball in that same vein. And it's not that crazy or demented. It just doesn't. Now, when you get to the big reveal, and I don't think we'll do the spoilers because it is fucking ridiculous and stupid. The reveal is, but I don't know. I don't know what. See, I want to be this enthusiastic about this film as all those other people are, but I genuinely don't know what. Like, I'm watching this film, and between the flashes of craziness, all the boring expositions, I wonder, what are those people who love this film doing? Are they off making a cup of tea or something? Do they not see this stuff? And you've got the most. John Richardson is so, again, charisma vacuum right at the center of this film as I guess the protagonist who kind of turns up to join the holiday with his secretary, and there's the red herring of his missus who we see at the beginning of the film, and again, you know, they hand out the red raincoats. I like the visual, and there's so much potential, but at the end of the day, I don't see how people don't see that this is a bog standard, not very good giallo with the occasional flash of the demented, but you're talking 95 to 5% ratio. Again, Mr. Boring objective man, but I can't help it. That is the film as far as I see it. Right, sorry, I shall now get down off the soapbox. Because I don't want people to. I want people to appreciate that I'm up for this. I'm up for it if it delivers. But I would be lying. I would be disingenuous if I said that I was thoroughly swept up by its trashiness, which I wanted to be. It's not there. It's not pieces level trashiness, unfortunately. Take it away, Nick. What did you make of Aiba? You've watched this one before as well, I assume.
Yeah, but I remembered it not at all. I remember not liking it.
It's interesting. You had 2 or 3 goes at constructing that sentence.
Yeah, but
should I put the word?
I'm studying linguistics right now, so yes, it's all very confusing. But so yeah, I remember not liking it much the first time, and this time around, I think so. It's interesting that what you're saying is that it has this outsized reputation.
Yes,
because I was reading, as I was reading reviews of this, like I was reading a review of somebody who's basically trying to redeem this film, who felt like most people considered it to be a piece of trash. And so this person's argument was that basically this is Lenzi at the end of his giallo cycle, who is just kind of bored and annoyed with the cheapness of it all, with you know the whole the tropes of this thing, and is just openly mocking the whole thing. And so this time I came into it.
I think the critical not the critical, the fandom consensus, I think, has changed over the years. I think you're quite right. I think that's what people would have said about it first time around. But since it's, you know, Blu-ray and all that, I mean, the fandom has really done a U-turn on this one, I think. And now this is very much a beloved film.
Because it looks cheaper and chintzier than a lot of the other ones we'd seen. Like the stuff in like when they go into the little, you know, cheapo Disneyland knockoff, you know, Snow White part, you know, and it all just looks so tawdry to me. And the actors are like they're an interesting bunch. The American, you know, the number of times I heard Burlington, Vermont, in the script,
right.
So that was, I mean, again, it seemed funny to me, but in ways that like it was like whether it was intentionally or unintentionally funny, it was hard to figure out. In the way that maybe Pieces can be that way too. Although I feel like Pieces is just funny. I don't think it's supposed to be funny. It just is funny. This film, I felt like maybe was trying to be funny, but isn't particularly funny either. Like I don't think it succeeds.
Well, no, that's the thing. If you're right, if he is kind of parodying the genre, then again, it doesn't matter because he hasn't done a particularly good job of it.
Yeah, and I agree, because I think, but there are moments it's just like, so you were saying that the parts between the boring parts, but even they were off to me. Like people would say stuff that was just like weird, like just
almost non sequiturs at times.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it was to say, is this just a bad script, or is that because he doesn't give a shit, or is that because he's trying to say this doesn't matter, this part of the movie is not important, so whatever. But it's not by any stretch of imagination one of my favorites of the Lenzi films we watched. It's definitely, even of the giallos, it's quite low on the poll as far as I'm concerned.
But I think it's the double infection there for me. The problem is it's not just that, but it's that it has the potential, right? That it does. It's got that title. It's got this ridiculous fucking premise, and it's got, you before you see it, maybe you're fed this kind of idea of what it is by rabid fans, and you're really primed for something. I hope I don't forget and watch it again.
I mean, I think what it maybe needs more than anything else then is it needs what's his face, De Rossi, right? Full cheese, Gorgon, because I feel like if you were going to go full on with the whole, it's not really particularly good. I don't see that as a problem, because there's something conceptually kind of weird and iconic about eyeballs in general. Like if you just have an eyeball, you don't have to have an eyeball dripping and go. Just having an eyeball, like the scene where spoilers again, but when the character turns out, when she tries to put someone else's eyeball in her own socket, that is actually quite like, oh yeah, no, it's gross.
But there's not enough of that, is there really? There's not enough of it.
No, I thought the murders were fairly tame, even compared to maybe compared to like the drill scene just a couple of movies ago. That seemed gorier to me.
Again, the piles of severed limbs of pieces, right? Like,
well, yes, that's a bit later on though.
No, but still, I think you could. I don't think necessarily you wouldn't have been able to have go in at this time period. I think.
Oh yeah, no. Yeah. I'm not saying you couldn't have. You definitely could. I mean, Fulci was already starting to push its buttons a little bit at this point. But yeah, no, I don't.
Okay, so it's a rare one that we agree on then.
Yes, no, I think if this film does have the outsized reputation that you're saying it does, then it's not warranted at all.
Right. Again, I mean, not if you enjoy this film, good for you, you enjoy it. But it's just genuinely, I do sometimes wonder if we're watching the same film, or if people are, I don't know, they're finding the film they like. I suppose this ties into a little bit like I was saying about why I sometimes have difficulty with your reactions to things, because it's almost as if you're reacting to the film you want it to be, and it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy or something. And I don't know, it feels like it's almost like you've tricked yourself into. So I'm glad you didn't do it with this, at least.
No, I mean, I think with something like Almost Human, I remember seeing it the very first time and immediately feeling just like, oh yeah, I get this.
The thing with Eyeball, I suppose, as well, though, it is missing a thing that those films you really like is they have someone to draw you in. They have a Milan, they have a Silva. Eyeball has no one, right?
No, there's no one in this film. It does have that one teenage actress who suddenly shows up dressed as Super Mario years before Super Mario was a thing. That really threw me when she came with the big red hat and the blue dungarees and the red undershirt. I was like, that's weird.
But there's no.
But they're all terrible. All the actors are super flat.
There's no one. Yeah, there's no one doing anything notable or of interest. I mean, the nearest it comes is that the American doctor guy who's with his daughter, who the bus driver is perving on.
Right.
Film. The bus driver who likes releasing like fake mice and insects.
Yeah. He's all right, actually. He's one of the very few things about the film.
I was thinking about this watching it. I was thinking, I wonder if Nick's gonna say, "This is awesome scene with the bus driver." I was wondering if that was just on the edge of tipping your scale, but
he's all right.
He's not consistently, because once the police get involved and he kind of
tamps himself down a bit. Yeah. No, yeah, no, it's of all of the of these 8 for this episode, it might be my lowest. I know that Knife of Ice is probably that for you, I'm assuming.
Yeah, a standout by far is Almost Human. But again, on a MILAN watching
Right.
level more than it is. Not a bad film, don't get me wrong, it's not a bad film, and it's just, I suppose the trouble with it is it's a little bit if you take out the MILAN, it's a little bit too long, I think.
Yes, I wouldn't disagree there. I think it's about 10 minutes longer than it needs to be.
Yes.
I think basically Lenzi's movies are almost always at their very best when they're like an hour and 29 minutes, and that's the perfect length. And I've said this before, you know, I rented Street Law on a VHS tape, and it was like 75 minutes long, the cut that I first saw. And then years later, I bought the DVD when it was released on one of those, you know, like Alpha Blue or whatever it was, you know, that put it out. And
I don't think it was Alpha Blue. I think
yeah, it's a different version of Street Law. It's a different law on the streets. I can't remember what it was. Anyway, whatever company put it out, and I watched it, and it was way longer. It was like an hour and 40 minutes, and I was like, no, this is not the film I remember. The film I remember was so taut. So like bang, bang, action, and all those scenes added nothing. Like they added nothing to I got everything I needed from the short version. I got the stakes of the story. I got the emotional stuff. Yeah. So yeah, I think you could easily trim 10 minutes out of Almost Human and be left with an even better film.
Yeah. The other classic example of that is Phenomena, the Creepers cut works.
Yes.
I think. Yeah. Anyway, yes, that's how end of our pro censorship run, which is unusual for us.
It is a bit weird, yeah. So we're into the kind of properly into the 70s next time.
Yeah, turns out Orgasmo is still Alberto Lenzi's best film thus far. And Almost Human is second place for me.
Okay.
And almost there, honorable mention. Yeah, onwards into the 70s. Yeah, Nick will be jizzing all over the place next time because it'll be his
apologize.
Yes.
There's a couple in there that are not going to be, I think, Syndicate Sadis I might not like as much as some of the others, but most of them are going to be for me.
Bring extra tissues to clean your screen.
Yeah. When you get Thomas Millian and Maurizio Merli and John Saxon all in the same film, again, whatever you feel about the films themselves, I think you'll have to agree that that's a lot of 70s Italian star power. That's a lot of scenery chewing going on.
There we go. Next time, look forward to the Nick Bona special. There we go. So until then, you've been watching Iguana'S Bumhole. See ya.
The triumphant Maciste and Satana prepare certain offense for the criminal syndicate in the jungle hell of an Iguana'S Bumhole.